What if being stuck isn't a flaw, but a signal? This audiobook is your wake-up call to break the cycle, rebuild your self-trust, and create a life that finally feels like yours. No more waiting. No more shrinking. Your breakthrough begins here. Press play and set yourself free. Introduction. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Most people spend years, sometimes decades, avoiding. You can build a beautiful life on the outside and still feel completely stuck on the inside. You can check every box, follow every rule, and still lie awake, wondering why your fire feels like it's dying. You can be high-achieving and deeply unsatisfied, smart, capable, surrounded by people, and still feel like you're slowly suffocating in a life that doesn't fit. No one talks about that part, the part where you should feel grateful, but you don't, where you know something needs to change, but you don't know where to begin, or worse, you do, but you don't trust yourself to follow through. This book isn't just about getting unstuck. It's about remembering who you are before. The world told you to shrink. It's about decoding the invisible patterns that keep you spinning, overthinking, people-pleasing, and doubting your way through life. It's about waking up, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. That's when the real shift begins. You don't just want change, you need it, not later. Now, because stuckness has a hidden cost, and it's steeper than we admit, being stuck doesn't always look dramatic. It rarely screams. Sometimes it whispers. You feel it in the tiny negotiations you make with yourself every morning, the way your dreams shrink so you can survive the day. You feel it in your body, the exhaustion that doesn't go away after sleep, the tension that lives in your shoulders, your jaw, your gut. You feel it when your joy feels distant, your clarity disappears, and your own reflection starts to look like someone you barely know. And yet, you function. You smile. You deliver, you scroll, you cope, you survive in a life that doesn't nourish you because you don't want to disappoint anyone, especially yourself. But here's the thing. Every day you stay stuck, you pay in energy, in time, in self-trust. Every day you postpone your becoming, your body keeps the score. And eventually, the gap between who you are and who you're pretending to be becomes too wide to cross. That's when it happens. The burnout. The crash. The quiet quitting of your own soul. But it doesn't have to get that far. This book is your turning point. If you've been waiting for a sign, a roadmap, a breakthrough, this is it. The 3-phase journey. This is not a passive read. This is a journey. And it moves in 3 powerful transformative phases. Phase 1. Break free. We'll dismantle the internal cages, perfectionism, fear, people-pleasing, self-doubt, and help you understand how you got stuck, not just why. You'll learn the psychological patterns behind your paralysis and reclaim the permission you've been waiting for. Phase 2. Level up. Once you clear the mental clutter, we rebuild. Aligned action, self-leadership, boundaries that don't burn you out, purpose you can actually feel in your body will shift your identity, your habits, and your self-belief from the inside out. Phase 3. Thrive. This is where you stop hustling for your worth, where joy becomes your strategy, where sustainability replaces self-sacrifice. We don't just want you unstuck, we want you free, fulfilled, and thriving in a life that feels like yours. Each chapter builds on the last. Each lesson is crafted to pull you deeper into clarity, power, and action. This isn't hype. It's healing. It's work. But it's the kind of work that changes everything. What you won't find here. This is not a grind harder, manifest more self-help cliche wrapped in glitter. You won't find empty affirmations, toxic positivity, or productivity hacks designed to squeeze more output out of your burnout. This isn't about fixing you. You're not broken. You're blocked. And most of what's in your way isn't your fault, but it is. Now your responsibility to change it. You won't be told to just believe in yourself without being taught how. You won't be told to take big leaps without first building your safety net, and you won't be shamed for struggling. This book honors your complexity, your cycles, your softness. You'll learn how to stop betraying yourself in the name of being liked, needed, or successful. Because stuckness isn't a mindset, it's a pattern. And patterns can be interrupted, rewired, replaced. How to use this book. Listen, pause, reflect, act. This book is designed to be more than read. It's meant to be felt, experienced, lived. You'll want to move through it at your own pace. But here's what I recommend. Listen deeply, pause often, reflect honestly, act courageously. Don't rush. Don't skip ahead. Let the questions sit in your bones. Let the truth make you uncomfortable if it needs to. You're shedding old skin. That doesn't happen neatly. But I promise, it's worth it. Each chapter ends with reflection prompts to help you integrate. Keep a journal close. Write as if no one's watching, because no one is. This is your space, your story. Let it be messy. Let it be real. You don't need perfect conditions to begin. You just need willingness, curiosity, a tiny spark of rebellion against the version of your life that no longer fits. And that rebellion, that's how freedom starts. One final note before we begin. If you've made it this far, then part of you is already awake. You're ready to remember what you were made for, to stop waiting for permission, to stop shrinking to fit spaces that were never meant for you. You are not lazy. You are not broken. You are not too much or too late. You are someone who's finally done pretending, done numbing, done hiding. And this is your next chapter. Let's get you unstuck. Chapter 1. The Anatomy of Stuck Common Signs. You're stuck, mentally, emotionally, situationally. Let's begin with what stuck actually feels like, because chances are, if you picked up this book, you already know the feeling. But sometimes we can't name it. We just know something's off. Life feels heavier than it should. You wake up with a strange weight in your chest, maybe not crushing, but persistent. A kind of fog that follows you around, even on days that look fine on paper. You go to work, you respond to texts, you might even smile and say, things are good. But under the surface, there's a low hum of discontent. That's stuck. It doesn't always show up dramatically. Sometimes stuck is subtle. It creeps in like background noise until one day you realize you've been sleepwalking through your own life for months or years. You might find yourself circling the same thoughts over and over again. You play out conversations that never happened. You imagine scenarios you're too scared to pursue. You overthink everything, what to say, what to do, when to act, and because of that, you often do nothing. You feel exhausted even though you haven't done much. You procrastinate decisions, not because you don't care, but because the idea of making the wrong move feels paralyzing. And worst of all, you judge yourself for it. You internalize it. You begin to believe that you're the problem, not your circumstances, not the fear, not the exhaustion, but you. As if something is inherently broken inside you that needs fixing before you're allowed to move forward. And that lie, that quiet, damaging lie, is what keeps you stuck. Stuck can show up in your career, where you stay in a job that no longer challenges you, simply because it's safe. It shows up in relationships, where you keep shrinking yourself to avoid conflict or choose comfort over truth. It shows up in your personal goals, things you once cared deeply about that now feel distant and impossible. You might say, I'll get back to writing, or I'll start the gym again soon. But that soon keeps stretching farther into the horizon. Meanwhile, your self-trust erodes a little more with every unkept promise you make to yourself. This is the loop that being stuck creates. The more stagnant you feel, the more overwhelmed you become, and the harder it is to believe you can ever change. Root causes: fear, comfort, identity, loops. Now let's pull the curtain back a little more. Getting unstuck isn't just about doing more or pushing harder. If that were the answer, you wouldn't be listening to this book. The real roots of stuckness often lie deep within the foundations of our thinking and self-identity. And if we don't understand those roots, we're just rearranging furniture in a burning house. Let's start with fear. Fear is the kingpin of stuck. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of change, fear of not being good enough, but also fear of success, fear of visibility, fear of what it means if we finally get what we say we want and it still doesn't make us happy. That one's sneaky. Most of us are taught to believe we fear falling short. But what if part of us fears what happens if we actually rise? If we actually become more than we are now, will we lose the people around us? Will we be expected to maintain that success forever? These fears don't live on the surface. They live in the subconscious. And until we confront them, we'll keep creating obstacles that protect us from our own expansion. Then there's comfort. This one's even trickier because comfort doesn't feel like an enemy. In fact, it often disguises itself as safety. But comfort zones aren't just cozy, they're cages. They trap us in routines, relationships, environments, and beliefs that feel familiar, even if they're unfulfilling. And the brain, which is wired for efficiency and certainty, prefers predictable discomfort over uncertain progress. So we stay. We tolerate jobs that drain us. We settle in relationships that feel hollow. We put our dreams on a perpetual someday list. Why? Because staying the same feels safer than stepping into the unknown. But here's the brutal truth. Comfort without growth slowly rots into resentment. And then there's identity loops, the unconscious stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what's possible for us. Maybe you've labeled yourself as bad with money, or not the type who can stick to things, or just someone who needs structure to function. These labels become part of our operating system, and the more we repeat them, the more they solidify, until one day they become self-fulfilling prophecies. You stop trying new things because you're not a risk taker. You avoid leadership roles because you're not that confident. And even when opportunities show up, you turn them down or sabotage them because they don't fit the script you've memorized. This isn't conscious, it's programming. And unless we interrupt those loops, we will keep living in the same limited narrative, no matter how many self-help books we read. The myth of waiting for the right time. Now let's talk about one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves when we're stuck. I'll do it when the time is right. Sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Wait for the perfect moment. Wait for the stars to align. Wait until you're ready. But let me ask you this. When exactly is ready? Is it a specific feeling? A moment of absolute certainty? A sign from the universe? Or is it just a socially acceptable way to procrastinate on our own potential? Here's the truth. There is no perfect time. There is only now and what you choose to do with it. The right time myth is a psychological cushion. It protects us from action by feeding the illusion that progress will magically feel easier later. But let's be honest. How many times has waiting for the right time actually worked in your favor? How many times has clarity or courage just shown up on its own? Chances are, the longer you've waited, the heavier the thing has become. The more daunting the change has started to feel. That's not because you're weak. It's because you've been dragging the weight of unresolved decisions behind you. We think waiting gives us power. We think it gives us control. But in reality, waiting is often just a polite form of avoidance. It keeps us in limbo, too scared to move forward, too uncomfortable to stay where we are. And over time, that limbo becomes our identity. We start calling ourselves indecisive or unmotivated, but really we're just scared. Scared to start, scared to fail, scared to admit we don't have all the answers. But guess what? Nobody does. The people who move forward don't have less fear. They just stopped letting fear make their schedule. And you know what else happens when you wait for the right time? Life moves on. Opportunities expire. Energy fades. People change. And the version of you that was ready to try, she starts to disappear. Not all at once, but slowly. And you wake up one day, realizing you don't recognize yourself anymore. That's the cost of waiting. That's the quiet tragedy of stuckness. It steals you from yourself, one delayed decision at a time. Differentiating between rest and resistance. Before we wrap this chapter, there's one more important distinction we need to make. One that trips a lot of people up when they're trying to get unstuck. It's the difference between rest and resistance. Because when you're stuck, everything feels exhausting, and it's easy to confuse the need to pause with the urge to hide. Rest is essential. It's sacred. It's a conscious decision to give your mind and body space to heal, to recalibrate, to breathe. Rest says, I care about myself enough to stop. Resistance, on the other hand, is avoidance dressed as self-care. It's hitting snooze not because you need sleep, but because you don't want to face the day. It's watching one more episode, not to unwind, but to escape. Resistance often feels like rest, but leaves you more drained. It numbs you without restoring you. And the tricky part? Only you can tell the difference. That's why self-awareness is so crucial here. Ask yourself, does this choice leave me feeling more aligned with who I want to be, or less? True rest rejuvenates. Resistance delays. And when you're stuck, it's easier to lean into resistance because it demands less. No discomfort, no risk, just delay. But the cost is high. Every moment spent in resistance deepens the rut you're in. And eventually, it gets harder to climb out. So what do? Start by noticing. Without judgment, become an observer of your own behavior. Track your energy, your choices, your patterns. Ask better questions. Instead of, why can't I get motivated? Try, what am I avoiding right now? Instead of, what's wrong with me? Try, what do I need to feel safe enough to move forward? These small shifts in language create space for compassion, and compassion creates momentum. Getting unstuck doesn't start with massive action. It starts with gentle awareness, with the decision to stop spinning long enough to notice the pattern, with enough honesty to say, I'm not where I want to be, and enough courage to follow that truth into something new. It starts here, with this chapter, with your willingness to listen, to yourself most of all. And now that we've named the problem, we can begin to dismantle it. In the next chapter, we're going to meet the part of you that has the loudest voice when you're stuck, the inner critic, the saboteur, the voice that keeps you small, quiet, and scared. But don't worry, we're not here to kill it. We're here to understand it, because once we do, it loses its grip. It's time to take the next step forward, not with perfection, but with presence. Let's keep going. Chapter 2. Meet your inner saboteur. Naming and understanding your inner critic. There's a voice in your head that's louder than the rest. You know the one. It doesn't just whisper doubts, it floods your mind with them. It tells you you're not ready, that you're too much or not enough, that you should have figured it out by now. It's a master of disguise, taking on the tone of a cautious friend or a responsible adult, but its real identity is far more dangerous. This voice is your inner saboteur, your inner critic. That part of you that seems to show up right when you're about to try, about to risk, about to grow, and it always knows exactly what to say to make you hesitate. We all have one. Some of us hear it constantly, others only catch it in moments of vulnerability. But it's there, often operating just beneath the surface, and while it may sound like an enemy, it didn't start out that way. Believe it or not, this voice was born to protect you. It emerged from experiences you've had, rejections, disappointments, betrayals, traumas. Over time, your mind created this voice to keep you safe from more hurt. It learned patterns. It watched how the world responded to you. And it concluded, if I can make you smaller, quieter, more cautious, you might avoid pain. And in a strange way, it worked. It got you through things. But now, it's overstepping. It's not protecting you anymore. It's limiting you. Naming your inner critic is the first step toward taking back your power. And I mean that literally. Give it a name. Whether you call it the judge, the perfectionist, the worrier, or something a little sassier like Negative Nancy, naming it creates distance. It reminds you that this voice is not your truth. It's a filter, one you can question, interrupt, and ultimately reprogram. Because when we leave this critic unnamed, it becomes our default narrator. And no dream, no goal, no meaningful change can survive under a hostile narrator. The role of shame, comparison, and perfectionism. Your inner saboteur doesn't operate in a vacuum. It feeds off three toxic sources: shame, comparison, and perfectionism. Let's start with shame, the most invisible yet powerful of them all. Shame doesn't just tell you that you did something wrong. It tells you you are something wrong. It roots itself in the deepest parts of your identity and whispers that you're unworthy of love, success, or peace unless you perform a certain way. This isn't the shame that helps us grow after a mistake. This is corrosive shame, the kind that festers and spreads and keeps you from even trying, because the possibility of failure feels like proof of your worst fear, that you're not enough. Comparison is its close cousin. We live in a world that makes it almost impossible not to compare. Every scroll, every click, every highlight reel reminds you of what you're not doing, not achieving, not becoming. It tells you that you're falling behind, that everyone else has it figured out, that if only you were more disciplined, more attractive, more together, you'd be where they are. But comparison never shows the full picture. It hides the failures, the pain, the mess, and it convinces you to judge your internal reality against someone else's external image. Your inner critic loves comparison because it reinforces its favorite narrative, that you're not doing enough, and you, as you are, will never be enough. Then comes perfectionism, the slickest and most seductive trap of all. Perfectionism doesn't look like sabotage. It looks like high standards. It looks like productivity. It looks like you care deeply about doing your best. But under the surface, it's just fear in fancy clothes. Fear of being exposed. Fear of rejection. Fear of starting something you might not finish or releasing something you can't control. Perfectionism says, if it's not flawless, don't do it. And so you wait. You edit. You stall. You say you're not ready. And the world never sees the gifts inside you because they're stuck behind a wall of perfectionism built by your inner saboteur. Together, these forces create a toxic inner climate that makes it nearly impossible to grow. They warp your self-perception and create an environment where fear thrives and self-trust withers. And the longer you let these forces run the show, the more they become your default operating system. But here's the beautiful part. Awareness is the beginning of liberation. Once you know what's happening, you can interrupt it. You can stop believing everything your inner critic says. You can question shame. You can unfollow comparison. You can lower the volume on perfectionism. It won't happen overnight, but it can happen. And it starts with telling the truth about what's going on inside you. Inner scripts that lie to you. Your inner saboteur isn't just loud, it's clever. It doesn't scream obvious insults. It writes scripts. Scripts that sound just true enough to be believable. And over time, you internalize these scripts as facts. You repeat them until they become beliefs, and beliefs become behavior. Some of these scripts are direct. You'll never succeed. You always mess things up. Others are more subtle. Don't get your hopes up. Better not try. It probably won't work anyway. These scripts are often borrowed. Maybe they were handed to you by a critical parent or a dismissive teacher. Maybe they formed after a painful breakup or a public failure. Wherever they came from, they aren't objective truth. They're interpretations filtered through the lens of hurt. And yet, they run silently in the background, shaping your choices, your risks, your voice. One of the most common scripts is, if I don't do it perfectly, I shouldn't do it at all. This script kills more dreams than failure ever could. It keeps you in planning mode forever. Another one? Who do you think you are? This one is brutal. It attacks your self-worth at the root and convinces you that you're being arrogant just for trying. It tells you that visibility equals vulnerability, and that vulnerability is unsafe. Then there's the classic. You should be further along by now. This one creates pressure. It makes you feel behind. It attaches your worth to your timeline and your timeline to other people's achievements. And just like that, your inner critic hijacks your progress by making you feel like you're already late to your own life. But these scripts are not fixed. They can be rewritten. The first step is catching them in real time. Notice when you hear that voice. Is it trying to keep you safe or keep you small? Is it warning you or shaming you? Ask yourself, would I speak to a friend this way? If not, it doesn't belong in your inner dialogue. Start replacing those old scripts with new ones, even if you don't fully believe them yet. Try. Progress matters more than perfection. Or, it's okay to be a beginner. Or, I'm allowed to take up space. These aren't just affirmations. They are interruptions. Every time you speak a kinder truth, you loosen the grip of that old voice. You create cracks in the armor of your inner saboteur, and light gets in. Turning awareness into action. Now you might be wondering, okay, I hear the voice. I recognize the scripts. I've even named my inner critic. But how do I actually change? Awareness is powerful, but awareness alone doesn't transform your life. Action does. And here's where many people get stuck. They think action has to be big, dramatic, or public. But when it comes to disarming your inner critic, action is often small, quiet, and internal. The most powerful actions are the ones that prove your inner saboteur wrong in real time. That might mean saying yes to a project even though you feel unqualified. It might mean posting something creative even though it isn't perfect. It might mean taking one brave step towards something your inner critic told you was off limits. These actions don't silence the voice, but they discredit it. Over time, the more you act in alignment with your potential, not your fear, the quieter the critic becomes. Not because it stops talking, but because you stop believing it. Another action? Rewriting the story you tell about past failures. Your inner saboteur thrives on using your past as evidence against you. It says, remember that time you tried and failed? That's why you shouldn't try again? But failure is only evidence if you treat it that way. You can choose to see it as experience, as growth, as proof that you were brave enough to try. Every time you reinterpret your past through a lens of compassion instead of criticism, you rob your inner saboteur of one more weapon. You can also start collecting micro-evidence of your growth. Keep a truth journal. Every time you show up, speak up, try something, or survive something difficult, write it down. Your inner critic relies on selective memory. It forgets your wins and magnifies your doubts. But when you have a record of your courage, your resilience, your small but meaningful steps, you can look back and remind yourself, I am not the same person I was a year ago. That's the kind of truth that drowns out the lie of stuckness. Most importantly, remember this: your inner saboteur isn't going away. It's part of being human, but it doesn't have to drive the bus. You can acknowledge its presence without handing it the keys. You can let it speak without letting it lead. The goal isn't to eliminate the voice, it's to strengthen your own voice until it's louder, wiser, and more rooted in truth. Chapter 3: Rewrite the Rules. Spotting inherited beliefs and rules. From the moment we are born, we begin absorbing rules, spoken and unspoken, intentional and accidental, wise and wildly outdated. These rules shape how we see the world, ourselves, and what we believe is possible for our lives. Many of them don't come with a label that says rule, and that's what makes them so insidious. They arrive in the form of expectations, cultural norms, family values, classroom behaviors, media messages, religious teachings, and social scripts. Some of these rules are helpful. Brush your teeth, say thank you, respect others. But tucked between the sensible ones are the rules that quietly start shrinking your identity. Rules like, don't be too loud, don't outshine others. Success is only real if it looks a certain way. You're supposed to put everyone else first. These aren't laws of the universe. They're just ideas passed down so often they started sounding like facts. The challenge is that most of us don't know we're following these rules. We move through life guided by invisible frameworks we didn't choose. These frameworks govern how we work, love, rest, speak, spend, grieve, and dream. You might feel a pang of guilt for wanting something different from what your parents wanted for you, but you don't stop to ask why. You may feel the pressure to settle down, get married, have kids, and build a predictable life, not because it resonates with your soul, but because it's what's been silently handed to you as the path. That's the weight of inherited beliefs. They aren't based on your truth. They're based on someone else's survival, someone else's fears, someone else's story. And if you're not careful, you end up living their life instead of your own. So how do you start spotting these hidden rules? Listen to your shoulds. Every time you say, I should, there's likely a rule hiding behind it. I should be further along. I should be more grateful. I should say yes. The word should often signals an obligation that came from outside of you. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but it deserves inspection. Ask yourself, who gave me this rule? Does it still serve me? Was it built on love or fear? Did it come from someone who truly knew and honored who I am, or from someone projecting their own limitations? This is not about rejecting everything you've learned. It's about reclaiming your agency to choose what stays and what goes. Why questioning your programming is uncomfortable and necessary. There's a reason why most people never rewrite the rules. They don't want to deal with the discomfort that comes with it. When you start questioning your programming, you shake the foundation of everything you've built your identity on. That's not a small task. It can feel like betrayal. If you come from a family that taught you to avoid conflict, speaking up might feel like breaking a sacred code. If your community equated success with burnout, choosing rest might feel like failure. If your upbringing rewarded self-sacrifice, prioritizing yourself might feel selfish. The discomfort isn't proof you're doing something wrong. It's evidence you're shifting deeply entrenched systems that have been running your life on autopilot. This discomfort shows up in subtle and loud ways. It's the guilt that creeps in when you say no, the anxiety that arises when you deviate from the crowd, the fear that you'll be judged, rejected, or misunderstood. And honestly, you might be. Not everyone will celebrate your decision to question old rules, especially if they still believe in those rules themselves. Your evolution can trigger people who are not yet ready to face their own. But the alternative, staying stuck in patterns that were never truly yours, is a far greater cost. There's nothing noble about abandoning yourself to keep other people comfortable. It's necessary to remember that growth isn't supposed to feel safe. The rules you're questioning were designed to keep you within the bounds of familiarity, not fulfillment. They were built to maintain systems, family systems, societal systems, internal systems, not to ignite your expansion. So yes, it's going to feel awkward. You're going to stumble. You're going to second-guess yourself. That's part of the process. You are reparenting your inner world, replacing old laws with new wisdom. And that kind of transformation isn't a clean linear journey. It's messy, emotional, and incredibly brave. The discomfort doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're finally waking up. Replacing shoulds with conscious choices. The most liberating shift you can make is this: move from obligation to ownership. That means replacing shoulds with conscious choices. It means pausing long enough to ask yourself what you truly want, not what will get you approval, not what will earn you praise, not what will keep the peace, but what actually aligns with your values, your vision, your voice. This isn't about being selfish. It's about being sovereign. It's about choosing your life with intention rather than inheriting it by default. This shift doesn't always feel glamorous. Sometimes it means sitting quietly with hard questions. What do I believe about success? And where did that belief come from? Am I doing this because I want to, or because I think I have to? What would I choose if I knew I didn't have to earn love through performance? These aren't casual reflections. They require you to slow down in a culture that rewards speed, to pause and listen in a world that glorifies noise. But this kind of reflection is where true power lives. When you stop outsourcing your decisions to invisible expectations, you become the author of your own story. Let's be clear, not every should is wrong. Some are grounded in ethics, kindness, and collective good. But if a should is draining you, boxing you in, or making you betray yourself, it's time to rewrite it. And the way you do that is simple, but not easy. You choose differently, one decision at a time. You say no even when it disappoints someone. You say yes even when you're afraid. You change direction even when you're not sure how it will look. And over time, those choices add up. They become the architecture of a life that feels honest, not perfect, not polished, but deeply, undeniably yours. Designing new internal boundaries. Once you start rewriting the rules and making conscious choices, you need a framework to support your new reality. That framework is built on internal boundaries. Most people think of boundaries as things we set with other people, and that's true to a point. But the most powerful boundaries are the ones you set with yourself. They define how you treat your time, your energy, your thoughts, your identity. They determine what gets access to your inner world and what doesn't. Designing internal boundaries means deciding what you're no longer willing to tolerate, not just externally, but internally. Maybe you decide you will no longer allow self-deprecating talk to go unchecked in your mind. Maybe you decide that your mornings are sacred and no longer up for grabs by texts, emails, or social media. Maybe you create a boundary around how much emotional labor you give to people who never ask how you're doing. Internal boundaries sound like, I don't spiral about things I can't control. I pause before reacting to stories my brain is telling me. I leave the party, the conversation, or the relationship when it starts costing me my peace. These aren't rigid walls. They are loving guidelines that help you stay rooted in your power. Creating these boundaries requires a level of self-respect that might feel foreign at first. If you've been trained to be hyper-accessible, emotionally available at all times, or endlessly accommodating, setting boundaries will feel like rebellion. But it's not rebellion. It's reclamation. You're not being cold or harsh. You're honoring your limits. You're creating a life that supports your healing and your growth. You're building internal safety so that when the external world feels chaotic, you don't collapse. You return to yourself. Over time, these boundaries create a new emotional ecosystem. You stop over-explaining. You stop negotiating your worth. You stop apologizing for existing. And you start making decisions from a place of self-trust rather than self-doubt. That's what this chapter is all about. Not just recognizing the old rules, but replacing them with a new internal structure that reflects who you are becoming, not who you used to be. The journey of becoming unstuck is not about adding more to your life. It's about letting go. Letting go of the rules that no longer serve you. Letting go of beliefs that were never yours to carry. Letting go of performances that keep you safe but suffocate your spirit. And as you do, you make room for something new. In the next chapter, we'll talk about that next frontier. Learning to lean into discomfort, not as a punishment, but as a portal. Because the uncomfortable space you've been avoiding, that's where growth lives. Let's go there, together. Chapter 4. The courage to get uncomfortable. Discomfort as a sign of growth. We've been conditioned to think discomfort is a warning sign, a flashing red light that tells us to turn back, play it safe, or stay in the familiar. But here's the truth that most people avoid confronting. Discomfort is often the only sign that you're growing. It is the heat that molds iron into strength, the pressure that turns coal into diamond, the resistance that builds the muscle of your character. When you step outside your comfort zone, when you apply for the job you're sure you're underqualified for, speak a truth you've kept hidden, end a relationship that no longer reflects your worth, you're not doing something wrong. You're stretching. You're expanding. You are, perhaps for the first time in a long while, becoming real. It's easy to chase certainty and mistake it for peace, but comfort can be deceiving. It doesn't always mean alignment. Sometimes, what feels comfortable is just familiar pain. It's the loop you know, the ache you've made room for, the pattern that's become a second skin, even if it chafes your spirit. That's why when you finally dare to disrupt it, your nervous system lights up like a storm. Your brain starts screaming, danger, retreat. But that's not always fear of failure. Sometimes it's the fear of success, of finally stepping into a version of you that your past self never believed was possible. And yes, it's disorienting. But discomfort doesn't mean destruction. It means rebirth. Like a seed cracking open underground, growth always begins in darkness, in pressure, in the place where you're forced to trust without knowing what comes next. Every meaningful transformation in your life will require you to walk through some form of discomfort. It will ask you to sit in the fire of uncertainty and let old identities burn away. It will nudge you to release control, to stop clinging to outcomes, to let the truth rise even when it terrifies you. Discomfort is not the enemy. It's a compass. It points you toward the edge of your current self and dares you to go beyond. And while you can't always choose what discomfort looks like, you can choose what it means to you. You can let it paralyze you, or you can let it be the proof that you're doing something brave, something real, something that matters. Risk versus regret, the long game. When we avoid discomfort, what we're often trying to avoid is risk. The risk of failure, embarrassment, disappointment, rejection. And that makes sense. The brain is wired to seek safety and risk feels like danger. But what if we reframed the equation? What if the real danger isn't risk, but regret? What if the cost of never trying is far greater than the cost of failing? Because here's the thing. Failure is momentary, but regret is corrosive. It doesn't go away with time. It deepens. It lingers in your bones and whispers, "What if?" when the room is silent. It robs you not only of experiences, but of identity, because you never get to meet the version of yourself who tried. It's tempting to live cautiously, to make choices that are easy to explain, to follow paths that others approve of. But that's the fast track to a hollow life, a life filled with checkboxes but absent of real fulfillment, a life that looks good from the outside but feels off on the inside. When you choose safety over truth again and again, you don't just miss out on opportunities, you disconnect from your own potential. You start shrinking your dreams to match your fears instead of expanding your courage to match your vision. You convince yourself that someday is noble, but someday is not a plan. It's a hiding place. Ask yourself, 10 years from now, what will matter more? The risk you took or the regret you didn't face? Will you remember the awkwardness of putting yourself out there, or the pride of knowing you had the guts to show up? Will you mourn the job you didn't get, or the life you didn't build because you were too scared to apply? Playing the long game means zooming out far enough to see beyond the discomfort of now and into the legacy of later. It means understanding that courage is not about fearlessness. It's about moving forward despite fear. And every time you choose risk over regret, you cast a vote for the person you're becoming, not just the one you've been. The tiny brave strategy. So how do you move through discomfort without being consumed by it? You don't need to leap off cliffs or blow up your whole life overnight. You need what I call the tiny brave strategy. It's the practice of doing small brave things every day, things that stretch your edges just enough to build resilience without snapping your nervous system. Tiny brave might look like asking a question in a meeting when you usually stay quiet, sending a pitch email you've been avoiding, saying no without offering a lengthy excuse, telling someone how you really feel. These aren't massive acts of rebellion, but they are micro-movements of self-honoring. And they matter. Tiny brave works because it creates momentum. It chips away at the wall of fear. Brick by brick, you start proving to yourself that discomfort won't kill you, that trying doesn't always mean failing, that your voice won't make the world collapse. And over time, those small brave choices add up. They compound into confidence. They turn into new patterns, new beliefs, new evidence that you are capable of so much more than your fear would have you believe. You're not waiting to be fearless. You're building bravery in real time. Here's the best part about Tiny Brave. It doesn't require perfection. It just requires presence, the willingness to stay in the moment long enough to choose alignment over avoidance. Some days you'll be able to stretch farther than others. That's okay. The goal isn't to be fearless, it's to be in motion, to stop waiting for a moment that feels risk-free and start building a life that honors your truth, even when your voice shakes. And when you inevitably fall short or mess up, you don't spiral. You remember that one brave moment doesn't erase another. You can begin again. Always. Learning to fail without crumbling failure is not the opposite of success. It's part of it. But we're rarely taught how to fail well. We're taught to fear it, to avoid it, to treat it like a scarlet letter. So when we do fail, and we all do, it often feels like proof of inadequacy instead of evidence of effort. But the people who live fully, who create, lead, and innovate, they aren't the ones who never fail. They're the ones who fail and don't crumble. The ones who know how to extract the lesson without internalizing the loss. The ones who see failure not as a verdict, but as feedback. Learning to fail without crumbling starts with separating who you are from what you do. You are not your mistakes. You are not your rejections. You are not the launch that didn't land or the dream that unraveled. You are the person who had the courage to try And that matters more than most people will ever know. Because trying means you believed in something enough to pursue it. And belief, when it's aligned with action, is the birthplace of transformation. If failure breaks you, it's not because you're weak. It's because you've been measuring your worth with a broken ruler. Resilience isn't built by avoiding hard things. It's built by facing them and choosing not to abandon yourself in the process. So when you fall, catch yourself with compassion. Ask, what did I learn? What will I do differently? How can I still honor this effort, even if the outcome wasn't what I hoped? And then, this part is crucial. You keep going. Not because you're unshaken, but because you've remembered that your mission is bigger than your momentary fear. Because the person who keeps trying, even after the fall, is the one who eventually rises, not by chance, but by choice. To grow, you must let go of the lie that comfort is the goal. You must learn to see discomfort, not as punishment, but as a passport, your access point to everything worth becoming. Growth lives just beyond your current identity, and you'll never get there by staying small. You get there by getting uncomfortable, by choosing risk over regret, by practicing tiny brave, by learning how to fail and still keep your heart open. This isn't easy work, but it's sacred, and you're doing it. In the next chapter, we'll talk about the loops we get stuck in, mental, emotional, behavioral, and how to finally break free from them. Because the goal isn't just to stretch, it's to create momentum that lasts. Let's go break the loop. Chapter 5, Break the Loop, Escaping Cycles of Overthinking and Procrastination. There's a moment, right before action, where the mind has a choice, lean in or pull away. And for many of us, this moment becomes a trap, a loop, a cycle that repeats itself under different names: overthinking, procrastination, hesitation. You may dress it up with logic. I'm just not ready. I need more time. I'm being thoughtful. But underneath, it's the same pattern. You spin, you stall, you silently suffocate in a swirl of second guessing. And if you've lived here long enough, it doesn't just feel normal. It feels responsible. Because overthinking masquerades as wisdom. It mimics preparation. But what it really does is protect you from risk by keeping you in pause mode indefinitely. It starts with a small uncertainty, a text you don't respond to, a task you keep pushing off, a conversation you avoid. Then the mind gets involved, wrapping its tendrils around the moment, dissecting it until it becomes unrecognizable. You start replaying scenarios, predicting every outcome, and planning for every potential failure. You convince yourself that you're being thorough, when really, you're just scared. Scared of rejection, scared of discomfort, scared of being seen trying. And the longer you stay in the loop, the more you believe the lie that you'll act once you feel ready. But readiness is a myth that lives on the other side of movement. It's not something you wait for. It's something you build. Procrastination isn't laziness. It's mismanaged emotion. It's your nervous system trying to delay exposure to fear, uncertainty, or inadequacy. When a task feels overwhelming or success feels too far away, the brain defaults to inaction as a form of self-protection. And this isn't about discipline, it's about compassion. Because if you keep punishing yourself for procrastinating without understanding why, you reinforce the shame loop. You start equating your worth with your productivity, and that makes the next attempt feel even heavier. The escape doesn't start with doing, it starts with noticing, with saying, I see the loop, I'm in it, and I choose to step out. The role of motion, imperfect action over perfect planning. If overthinking is the enemy of progress, then motion is its antidote, not perfect plans, not flawless strategy. Motion. Actual tangible movement. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be public. It just has to happen. Because clarity isn't born from analysis. It's born from action. You don't think your way into confidence. You do your way there. One step, one micro-decision, one imperfect attempt at a time. The magic is not in waiting until every star aligns. It's in learning to dance in the mess, to build while unsure, to keep showing up even when the finish line feels invisible. Imperfect action is how you reclaim momentum. When you drop the pressure to get it right, you create space for experimentation. You give yourself permission to suck, to stumble, to revise in real time. And that's not sloppy, it's strategic, because action creates feedback. Feedback creates learning. Learning creates refinement. The loop only breaks when you stop thinking in extremes. Either I do it perfectly, or I don't do it at all. Perfectionism might feel noble, but it's just fear in a nicer outfit. It's the voice that says, if I can't guarantee success, I won't try at all. And that voice? It's not serving you. Start where you are with what you have. If the task feels too big, shrink it. Make the first step so ridiculously small that resistance has no room to argue. If you can't write the chapter, write the sentence. If you can't clean the whole room, organize one drawer. If you can't run the mile, put on your shoes. Movement begets movement. You don't need motivation to begin. You need to begin to generate motivation. Action is not the reward of clarity. It's the prerequisite. And when you choose motion, even messy motion, you build proof. Proof that you're not stuck, you're starting. Tools to stop spiraling, mental resets, and pattern interrupts. Breaking the loop doesn't mean you'll never spiral again. It means you learn how to catch yourself quicker, to disrupt the spin before it becomes a storm. And that requires tools, simple, practical, repeatable ways to reset your mind and reclaim your focus. One of the most powerful tools is the pattern interrupt. Think of it like yanking the plug on a spinning record. It doesn't destroy the music, it just stops the repetition. Pattern interrupts can be physical, verbal, or environmental. You might stand up and shake out your body, clap your hands, say something out loud like pause or that's not true. The goal is to jar the loop just enough to make space for choice. Another tool is the mental reset ritual. This is not about forcing positivity. It's about creating intentional pause points in your day to recalibrate. It might be a 5-minute breathwork session, a walk without your phone, a post-it note mantra you return to, or a playlist that shifts your emotional state. The point is to give your brain a break from the spin cycle, a way to remember that you are not your thoughts, and you're allowed to stop the momentum of negativity. The more often you reset, the more you train your mind to recover instead of ruminate. And when the spiral feels deeper, when it's not just a moment of procrastination, but a full-blown overwhelm, lean into grounding. Use your senses. What can you feel, see, smell, hear right now? Grounding brings you back to the present, which is the only place action can happen. Remember, spirals live in the future or the past. Presence is the portal back to power. And when you ground yourself, you give your nervous system the signal. We're safe. We're here. We're okay. From that place, you can choose again. Building awareness into your daily routine. Loops don't form in chaos. They form in rhythms. In the small, unnoticed habits that repeat themselves every day. The mind loves repetition. And if you're not actively shaping that repetition, it will default to whatever is easiest, often fear, avoidance, or self-doubt. That's why awareness must be part of your routine, not just your breakthroughs. Daily check-ins, micro moments of reflection, practices that pull you back into the role of observer instead of victim. Because the loop only controls you when it's invisible. When you see it, you can start to steer. Start with bookends, how you begin and end your day. These are the two most powerful anchors for awareness. In the morning, ask yourself, what energy am I choosing today? What's one thing I can move forward, even a little? At night, reflect, where did I get stuck? What did I learn? What do I want to try differently tomorrow? These questions aren't about judgment. They're about curiosity, about becoming someone who notices the pattern early before it becomes cemented. And don't underestimate the power of ritual. Rituals are the containers that hold your awareness. A morning stretch, a journaling prompt, a recurring calendar reminder to breathe. These aren't trivial. They are the guardrails that protect your momentum. They keep your intentions in view when life gets loud. You're not aiming for perfection. You're creating a rhythm of noticing, a lifestyle of reflection. That's how you build a new loop, a loop of forward motion, self-trust, and realignment. To break the loop, you don't need to become a new person overnight. You just need to disrupt the autopilot, to choose one brave action over another hour of spiraling, to move, even imperfectly, to reset instead of ruminate, and to remember that awareness isn't a one-time breakthrough. It's a habit, a practice, a way of being that says, I will not abandon myself to this pattern again. You have the tools now. The question is, will you use them? Will you choose motion over mind loops? Will you step into the moment instead of replaying the past or fearing the future? If the answer is yes, even with a shaky voice or a hesitant heart, then you're already free. You're already rising. In the next section of the journey, we move from breaking free into leveling up. Because once you've disrupted the patterns that kept you stuck, you get to build something bold, grounded, and deeply aligned. The real work begins now. Let's step forward. Chapter 6. Clarity is a compass. Why most people confuse goals with noise. We live in an age where ambition is everywhere, but direction is scarce. Everyone is chasing something. Status, security, approval, success. But few can articulate why. The truth is, most people confuse motion with meaning. They set goals because they're supposed to. They say yes because they're afraid to be left behind. They build lives based on borrowed dreams and secondhand values, never stopping to ask if the path they're sprinting down is even theirs. Without clarity, you can climb fast and still end up somewhere you never wanted to be. This is the tragedy of modern achievement. We're overloaded with options and starving for intention. Clarity isn't about having every answer. It's not about being certain or fearless. Clarity is about alignment. It's the practice of stripping away noise until what remains is unmistakably yours. When you don't have clarity, every decision becomes a debate. Every detour feels like failure. You chase validation instead of vision, and you exhaust yourself trying to become someone who looks successful instead of someone who feels fulfilled. But when you're clear, truly clear on what matters, everything shifts. The noise fades, the pressure lifts. You move with purpose, not panic. You stop proving and start becoming. The danger of unclear goals isn't just that they waste time. It's that they drain your spirit. They erode your sense of self by pulling you in 100 directions, none of which bring you closer to your core. You say yes to things that feel heavy. You pursue metrics that don't light you up. You become reactive instead of creative. And before long, you're living a life that looks full, but feels empty. The antidote isn't another planner or productivity hack. It's a pause, a reckoning, a moment of brave honesty where you ask, what do I want? Not what I've been told to want, not what everyone else is chasing. What feels true to me? The clarity trifecta: vision, values, voice. Clarity isn't a single idea, it's a constellation. And at the heart of it lies what I call the clarity trifecta: vision, values, and voice. When these three elements are defined and aligned, they act like a compass. They keep you grounded in a chaotic world. They help you say no with confidence and yes with conviction. They keep you from trading authenticity for approval. So let's break each of them down, not as abstract concepts, but as practical pillars that shape the way you live, choose, and grow. Your vision is the picture of the life you're building, not just the outcomes, but the feeling you want to wake up to. It's about how you want to move through the world, what you want to contribute, and who you want to become. Vision isn't a 5-year plan. It's a felt sense of direction. It's what anchors your actions in meaning. Without vision, progress feels like pressure. With it, even hard days have purpose. To uncover your vision, ask yourself, what does success feel like, not just look like? What kind of energy do I want my life to run on? Who do I admire? Not for what they have, but for how they show up. Your values are your non-negotiables. They're the principles you refuse to betray even when no one's watching. Values give your vision integrity. They protect your soul from being sold in the name of productivity. When you define your values, you become unshakable. You stop compromising for convenience. You walk away from opportunities that aren't aligned, not because they're bad, but because they're not you. And here's the key. Your values don't have to be trendy or impressive. They just have to be yours. Maybe you value depth over speed, peace over performance, integrity over optics. Whatever they are, name them, claim them, live them. And finally, your voice. This is the expression of your truth. Your voice is how your clarity comes alive in the world. It's the way you set boundaries, ask for what you need, and share your perspective. When you silence your voice, you abandon your clarity. You start living for others instead of from within. But when your voice is strong, you become magnetic, not because you're loud, but because you're real. Your words carry weight because they come from a place of congruence. This is not about always knowing what to say. It's about being willing to say something that's honest, even when it's hard. Eliminating goal clutter. Just like physical clutter, mental clutter weighs you down, and one of the biggest sources of that clutter is unfiltered goals. These are the aspirations you inherited, absorbed, or accepted without examining. They pile up quietly, some disguised as obligations, others dressed up as dreams. And before long, your mental space is crowded with shoulds and half-finished pursuits. This clutter creates paralysis. It becomes harder to prioritize, to focus, to move. And worse, it disconnects you from your internal compass. You start following calendars instead of calling. You confuse being busy with being aligned. To eliminate goal clutter, you need to declutter with ruthless compassion. Start by writing down every goal, task, and expectation swirling in your head. Don't edit, just get it all out. Then, one by one, ask, is this mine? Is this meaningful? Is this aligned with my vision and values? If it's not, it goes. No guilt, no explanation. Not everything you can do is worth doing. Not every invitation is an obligation. Releasing a goal doesn't mean you've failed. It means you've evolved. You've clarified. You've chosen depth over distraction. What remains after this process is your essential work. The things that move your life forward, not just in appearance, but in essence. These are the goals that deserve your energy. And when you focus on them, you stop chasing 10 things at once and start building momentum where it matters. Clarity isn't about doing more with better efficiency. It's about doing less with more intention. It's not about adding complexity. It's about creating space. Space to breathe, to think, to be. And that space, that's where your genius lives. Saying yes with intention clarity gives you the power to say yes, not reactively, but intentionally. Without clarity, your yes becomes diluted. You agree to things out of fear, fear of missing out, fear of disappointing others, fear of not being enough. But every yes is a contract. It commits your time, energy, and attention. And if you say yes from the wrong place, you end up resenting the very things you once chased. Clarity shifts that. It transforms your yes into a statement of ownership, a declaration that says, "This matters to me. This aligns with who I'm becoming. This is a seed worth planting." Saying yes with intention starts by creating a pause between request and response. You don't owe anyone instant access to your bandwidth. When someone asks for your time or energy, give yourself the space to check in. Ask, does this align with my current priorities? Will this move me closer to or further from my vision? Am I saying yes to serve or to be seen? These questions aren't barriers, they're boundaries. They protect your clarity from being hijacked by guilt or distraction. Intentional yeses also require clarity on your season. You can't do everything at once, and you shouldn't try. There are seasons for building, for resting, for deepening, for expanding. And each season demands a different type of yes. What's aligned in one chapter may not be in the next. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it real. Your clarity must evolve with your life. That's why regular reflection isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. It keeps you attuned to your truth, even as the world around you changes. Clarity is not a luxury for the lucky few. It's a necessity for anyone who wants to live deeply, not just perform endlessly. It doesn't arrive fully formed. It's forged through curiosity, honesty, and 1,000 brave micro-decisions. It's what keeps you from burning out on the wrong mountain. It's what helps you notice when your goals are no longer aligned with your growth. It's what whispers, in a world full of noise, this way. Not because it's easy, not because it's popular, but because it's yours. As we move deeper into this phase of the journey, level up, you'll learn to pair your clarity with systems, habits, and identity-based action. Because clarity without follow-through is just philosophy. But when you bring it to life through your routines, your choices, and your daily presence, it becomes power. Quiet power. Rooted power. The kind that doesn't need to shout because it knows exactly where it's going. And you're going somewhere real. Let's keep walking. Chapter 7. Real Discipline. For Real People. Why willpower isn't your problem. Discipline has long been sold as a product of brute force, the myth that if you just had enough willpower, you'd be unstoppable. That if you could wake up earlier, grind harder, resist longer, you'd finally reach that polished version of yourself you imagine in quiet moments. But real life doesn't work like a montage. Willpower is unreliable, fleeting, and often absent when you need it most. It's not because you're weak. It's because willpower was never meant to carry the weight of your entire transformation. What you need isn't more inner force. It's more inner infrastructure. Most people who think they lack discipline are actually just exhausted, not lazy, not unmotivated. Exhausted from perfectionism, decision fatigue, self-judgment, and the constant mental gymnastics of trying to do everything at once. They don't need more grit. They need more grace and structure. They need a way of living that supports their energy instead of draining it. The truth is, the people who appear most disciplined aren't the ones with the most self-control. They're the ones who've designed their lives to require less of it. They've built environments, systems, and rhythms that do the heavy lifting for them. We're not meant to white-knuckle our way through life. If every action feels like a battle against yourself, something is off. The goal isn't to overpower your resistance. The goal is to understand it. Resistance is information. It's your inner signal that something is misaligned, overwhelming, or unprocessed. When you listen to it, not to obey it, but to decode it, you begin building discipline from the inside out. A discipline that isn't loud or rigid, but calm, steady, and sustainable. the kind that doesn't crumble the moment life throws a curveball. Designing frictionless habits. Habits that last don't require superhuman effort. They require smart design. One of the most powerful ways to build discipline is to reduce the friction between you and the behavior you want to repeat. Friction is any barrier, mental, emotional, logistical, that makes a task feel heavier than it needs to be. The more friction a habit has, the more likely you are to delay, avoid, or abandon it. And the more you do that, the more you internalize the false story that you're just not disciplined enough. The problem isn't you. It's the invisible barriers nobody taught you to remove. Frictionless habits start with environment. Your space shapes your behavior more than you realize. If your phone is the first thing you see in the morning, don't be surprised when you scroll instead of stretch. If your healthy meals require 30 minutes of prep but junk food is always within arm's reach, guess what wins? You can't willpower your way past your surroundings indefinitely. You must become intentional with how you set the stage. That means putting your journal next to your bed, setting out your workout clothes the night before, prepping meals in advance, making the right choice the easy choice. But friction isn't just physical, it's also mental. The stories you tell yourself about what something requires can inflate its weight unnecessarily. If you believe working out means an hour of intensity, you'll avoid it when you're tired. But if you redefine it as 10 minutes of movement, suddenly it feels doable. The key is to lower the activation energy, the amount of effort required to begin. Because once you start, momentum often takes over. Discipline is less about big wins and more about reducing resistance to small, repeatable actions that compound over time. Systems over motivation. Motivation is emotional weather. It changes constantly. It's influenced by sleep, mood, hormones, stress, environment, and 1,000 invisible factors. It cannot be your foundation. Discipline built on motivation will always be fragile. What you need instead are systems, structured, repeatable processes that reduce decision fatigue and automate your progress. A system doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It builds readiness into your routine. And the best systems are simple, flexible, and scalable. They don't break when life gets messy. Think of a system as a choreography for your future self. It's a pre-made agreement between who you are now and who you want to become. For example, if your goal is to read more, don't just say, "I'll read when I have time." Build a system. Decide you'll read 5 pages after breakfast, or 10 minutes before bed, or during your lunch break walk. The system removes the mental negotiation. It turns the behavior into something automatic, not aspirational. Over time, this repetition becomes identity, and identity creates momentum. Systems also create safety. They give you something to return to when life derails you. Without a system, every disruption feels like failure. But with a system, it's just a pause in a larger pattern. You can step away without spiraling, come back without shame. This is how real discipline grows, not through intensity, but through consistency. Not through punishment, but through design. When you create systems that honor your bandwidth and your humanity, you stop burning out and start building up. Getting back on track without shame. Falling off track isn't a character flaw. It's part of the process. Yet so many people treat a missed day or a messy week like a verdict instead of a variable. They spiral into shame, beat themselves up, and often abandon the very habits that were helping them heal. Discipline becomes a weapon instead of a tool. But the truth is, discipline that can't hold space for imperfection isn't discipline. It's just fear in disguise. Real discipline includes recovery. It includes self-compassion. It knows that the question isn't, "Did I mess up?" but, "How do I return with love?" The first step in getting back on track is interrupting the shame loop. Shame tells you that your slip-up defines you. It shrinks your identity to your worst moment. But compassion tells a deeper story, that you are more than your mistakes, that a lapse is not a loss of progress, but an invitation to reconnect. To reclaim your agency, you must meet yourself with kindness, not critique. Ask yourself, what triggered the disruption? What did I need in that moment that I didn't give myself? What support would help me stay grounded next time? Next, reduce the re-entry barrier. Don't try to resume at full intensity. Start small. If you haven't worked out in weeks, go for a short walk. If you abandoned your journal, write one sentence. The goal is to re-establish trust with yourself, not to punish your way back into rhythm. Every time you show up, even imperfectly, you signal to your nervous system that you're safe to begin again. Over time, this builds a new default, not of perfection, but of resilience. And that, more than anything, is what real discipline looks like. Getting back on track also requires honesty. Maybe the system you created wasn't truly aligned. Maybe it was based on someone else's version of success. That's okay. Use the disruption as data. What felt heavy? What felt hollow? What needs to be redesigned, not just resumed? Discipline isn't about forcing yourself to do what you hate. It's about discovering what works in the long term, in the real world, with your real life. When you give yourself permission to adapt instead of abandon, you turn setbacks into pivots, not endpoints. Real discipline isn't glamorous. It doesn't always look like crushing goals or hustling harder. Sometimes it looks like choosing rest without guilt, like getting up after a hard day and trying again, like saying no to what drains you so you can say yes to what sustains you. It's quiet, grounded, and deeply personal. It doesn't shout, but it shows up. And over time, it creates a life of integrity, not just achievement. A life where your actions reflect your values, where your habits nourish your future, where your systems support your humanity. You don't need to wait until you feel ready to build real discipline. You start with what you have. You build one tiny structure at a time. You show up, not for perfection, but for alignment. And you forgive yourself when it's messy, because growth is not linear. It's cyclical, like the seasons, like your breath. Discipline is simply choosing again and again to return to the path that feels true, even if you wandered, even if you paused, even if you doubted. You're not here to prove your worth through productivity. You're here to live in a way that honors who you are becoming. That is discipline in its truest form. And you are capable of that kind of discipline, not someday, but now. Let's keep building. Chapter 8. Build identity-based habits. Acting like the person you're becoming. Every sustainable transformation begins at the level of identity. Most people approach habit change backward. They start with outcomes. I want to lose weight. I want to make more money. I want to write a book. Without first asking the deeper question, who am I becoming? When your habits are only tied to goals, they feel fragile. The moment the goal feels far away or your motivation dips, the habits crumble. But when your habits are tied to identity, they gain staying power. You're no longer just acting to achieve something. You're acting to reinforce who you are. Think of every habit as a vote for the type of person you want to be. If you journal today, you're casting a vote for being a reflective person. If you go for a walk, you're casting a vote for being someone who honors their body. Every small, seemingly insignificant choice builds a bridge between who you are and who you're becoming. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be consistent enough that your new identity starts to feel natural, not a costume you wear, but a skin you grow into. This is how real change roots itself, not through intensity, but through repetition tied to meaning. When your actions are congruent with your desired identity, you start building internal harmony. There's less resistance because you're not trying to force yourself into behavior. You're living it. You're not just doing productive things. You are a focused person. You're not just working out. You are someone who values energy and health. The more this self-image solidifies, the easier it becomes to act in alignment with it. Identity-based habits are not about striving. They're about remembering, calling forward the version of you that already exists beneath the surface and letting your behavior reflect that truth. Habit stacking with identity in mind. When building identity-based habits, the key is to integrate them into the rhythm of your existing life. One of the most effective tools for doing this is habit stacking, the process of pairing a new habit with an existing one, so it becomes easier to remember and execute. But the most powerful habit stacks are not just convenient, they are identity affirming. They reinforce not only a behavior, but a belief. This is who I am now. And when done right, they feel seamless, not forced. Let's say you already make coffee every morning. That's a perfect anchor. You can pair it with a habit that reinforces your identity. Want to become someone who practices gratitude? Place a small notebook next to your coffee maker. Every time you brew, jot down one thing you're grateful for. Want to become someone who prioritizes movement? Stretch for 2 minutes while your coffee steeps. These micro habits might seem small, but their power lies in their accumulation and in the identity they reinforce every single day. The magic of habit stacking is that it removes the need for motivation. You're not relying on willpower to remember what to do. You're tying new behaviors to reliable triggers. Your brain loves patterns, and once a stack becomes automatic, you no longer have to think about it. Over time, your identity shifts, not because you made dramatic changes, but because you consistently layered new behaviors onto existing rituals. The stack becomes a scaffold for your evolution. And when these habits are chosen intentionally to match your values and vision, you begin to embody the future version of yourself in the now. The power of small wins. In a world obsessed with dramatic before and after stories, we often overlook the quiet power of small wins. Yet it's these subtle victories, getting out of bed when it's hard, saying no when you want to people please, showing up when you'd rather check out, that build real confidence. Not performative confidence, but earned confidence. The kind that says, I can trust myself. That trust is what makes identity-based habits stick. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries to change and start seeing yourself as someone who does. The brain is wired to respond to progress, not perfection. Each time you complete a habit, no matter how small, you get a hit of dopamine, reinforcing the behavior and making you more likely to repeat it. This reward loop is how momentum builds. But the real transformation happens when those small wins start to shift your internal narrative. You no longer say, I'm trying to get healthy. You say, I'm someone who takes care of my body. You no longer say, I hope I can be disciplined. You say, I'm someone who shows up. These identity statements are not affirmations you force. They are reflections of consistent evidence. Small wins also create resilience. When life gets chaotic, massive changes feel impossible, but small wins remain accessible. They are your anchor when everything else feels unsteady. They remind you that progress doesn't disappear just because circumstances get hard. In fact, those are the moments when your identity is solidified most deeply. Not in the ease, but in the effort. Not in perfection, but in presence. When you can still show up in the smallest way, even when everything in you wants to give up, that's when you know the shift is real. Staying consistent when life is chaotic. One of the biggest myths about habit formation is that it requires perfect conditions, that if your schedule's off, your energy's low, or your world is spinning, it's not worth trying. But the truth is, life is always a little chaotic. Waiting for calm to commit is like waiting for silence to sing. What you need isn't ideal circumstances, it's adaptable strategies. Consistency doesn't mean never missing a beat. It means knowing how to dance with the rhythm, even when it changes. Identity-based habits thrive when they are flexible, not fragile. Start by defining your minimums. Your minimums are the smallest version of your habit that still counts as a win. They are not fallback plans. They are your non-negotiable identity anchors. If your ideal is a 30-minute workout, your minimum might be 5 squats and a stretch. If your ideal is journaling a page, your minimum is writing 1 sentence. These are not signs of lowered standards. They are signs of resilience. They keep you connected to your identity even when your bandwidth is low. They say, "This still matters to me even now." Next, build in recovery. Sustainable consistency includes rest. Burnout often masquerades as laziness, but it's not. It's a signal that something needs to shift. Maybe your habit load is too heavy. Maybe you're chasing too many versions of success at once. Maybe you're expecting yourself to perform without replenishing. Real consistency includes cycles. Push and pause. Focus and float. When your habits reflect this rhythm, they become sustainable. And when they're sustainable, they become part of your identity. Not because you force them, but because you live them. Chaos doesn't have to derail your growth. In fact, it's in chaos that your habits are tested and refined. If a habit only works in ideal conditions, it's not really integrated. But when a habit survives disruption, because it's tied to your identity, supported by systems and grounded in grace, it becomes unshakable. And when you know your habits can bend without breaking, you begin to trust yourself in a new way. Not because everything is under control, but because you are. When you stop trying to fix yourself and start showing up as the version of you that already exists beneath the noise, everything changes. Your habits stop being desperate attempts to earn worth. They become daily expressions of your becoming. You don't have to wait to feel different to act differently. In fact, it's the consistent acting that rewires how you feel. This is the essence of identity-based habits, not performance, but embodiment, not pressure, but presence. Every choice becomes a quiet declaration. This is who I am now. You may not feel ready. You may still carry doubts. That's okay. You don't need to eliminate resistance. You just need to act with clarity in its presence. With each action, you add to the narrative of who you are becoming. Not by chasing perfection, but by returning again and again to alignment. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Because identity isn't declared, it's demonstrated. Through your rituals, through your routines, through the person you choose to be when no one is watching. You're not building habits just to check boxes. You're building a life that reflects your truth. One small act at a time. One vote at a time. One choice at a time. Let's keep voting for the real you. Chapter 9. Burnout-Proof Growth. What sustainable progress actually looks like. We've been sold a myth that progress is only valid if it's visible, dramatic, and relentless. Growth is packaged as a before and after story, a sharp contrast between failure and success, as if you wake up one day with everything figured out and never falter again. But real progress, the kind that doesn't collapse under pressure, looks nothing like that. It's quiet, it's layered, it's often invisible to others and sometimes even to yourself, until you realize you're handling something today that would have broken you a year ago. Sustainable growth rarely shouts. It whispers in consistent choices, in better boundaries, in calmer responses to old triggers. It's not about how fast you evolve. It's about how deeply your evolution roots itself into your daily life. If you've grown up measuring your worth through productivity, detaching your progress from constant output can feel foreign, even threatening. We live in a world that rewards hustle, glorifies exhaustion, and equates busyness with value. But that's not progress. That's burnout in disguise. Sustainable growth doesn't run on fumes. It runs on rhythm. You grow best when you have space to integrate, time to reflect, and permission to pause. This is what the old models never taught you. Growth is not just about stretching beyond your limits. It's about knowing when to return to yourself, to rest, and to rebuild your capacity. When you stop measuring progress by how much you can endure and start measuring it by how well you take care of yourself while evolving, everything changes. The lie of hustle culture. At some point, hustle culture sold us a story that equated success with self-sacrifice. You've probably heard it in different forms. Grind now, shine later. Sleep is for the weak. If you're not obsessed, you're not serious. These messages aren't just wrong, they're dangerous. They teach us to override our bodies, ignore our emotional signals, and trade our peace for productivity. Hustle culture makes you feel like if you're not exhausted, you're not doing enough. But here's the truth. Chronic exhaustion is not a badge of honor. It's a warning sign. When your nervous system is constantly in overdrive, when your schedule leaves no room to breathe, when your goals feel more like cages than callings, you're not thriving. You're surviving under the illusion of progress. One of the most damaging aspects of hustle culture is that it masks self-abandonment as ambition. You start pushing, not because you're inspired, but because you're afraid of falling behind. You ignore your limits, sacrifice your health, isolate from your relationships, all in service of an image. And when the crash inevitably comes, you blame yourself for not being strong enough, not disciplined enough, not resilient enough. But burnout isn't a personal failure. It's a systemic consequence of building your growth on a foundation of depletion. True ambition isn't about how hard you can push. It's about how wisely you can build. It's about asking not just, can I do this, but can I sustain this without betraying myself? Rejecting hustle culture doesn't mean rejecting hard work. It means working in a way that honors your whole self, not just your output. It means choosing alignment over achievement at any cost. It means understanding that rest is not a reward you earn at the finish line. It's a requirement for reaching it in the first place. When you detach from hustle myths, you start realizing that the most potent success comes not from grinding yourself down, but from building a life that supports your energy, your joy, and your longevity. Balancing intensity with restoration. Growth does require effort, but effort doesn't have to mean constant intensity. One of the most powerful shifts you can make is learning to toggle between seasons of pushing and seasons of pacing. You are not a machine. You are a cyclical being, biologically, emotionally, and spiritually. Just like nature doesn't bloom all year, neither can you. Sustainable growth means knowing when to push forward and when to pull back. It's about honoring the wisdom of rest as much as the drive of momentum. When you balance intensity with restoration, you create a rhythm that your body and mind can sustain over time. Restoration is not just physical, it's also mental and emotional. Maybe you need time alone after a season of overextending socially. Maybe you need creative play after weeks of structured execution. Maybe you need silence after being overly stimulated. Restoration is about identifying what part of you has been overused and giving it space to recover. Too often, we think taking a break means doing nothing, but real rest is active. It's about choosing nourishing inputs. It's about asking, what would refill me right now? Sometimes that's sleep. Sometimes that's laughter. Sometimes it's therapy, nature, or a long exhale. What matters is that you make restoration a core part of your growth, not an afterthought. Balancing intensity with restoration also requires discernment. Not every opportunity is worth your energy. Not every invitation is aligned with your season. When you say yes to everything, you deplete yourself trying to prove your value. But when you start evaluating your commitments through the lens of sustainability, you become more intentional. You learn that saying no is not selfish, it's strategic. It protects the ecosystem of your life. And in that space, growth becomes something you're building with care, not chasing with desperation. Creating routines that restore you, not drain you. Routines have often been framed as rigid, militaristic tools for discipline. But in reality, the most effective routines are the ones that support your nervous system, honor your energy patterns, and create spaciousness, not suffocation. A routine should feel like scaffolding, not shackles. It should hold you up when life gets unpredictable, not weigh you down with guilt when you can't follow it perfectly. When you build routines around restoration instead of output, you begin to create a life that feels like it fits you, not a life you're constantly trying to catch up to. Start with your mornings. How you begin your day sets the tone for how you experience time, stress, and energy. A restorative morning routine isn't about cramming in 10 self-improvement practices. It's about grounding yourself in presence. Maybe that's 5 minutes of stillness before the noise. Maybe it's a nourishing breakfast eaten without distraction. Maybe it's music, movement, or light. The goal is to signal to your nervous system, you are safe, you are grounded, and you are allowed to begin gently. When you start from that place, you're less reactive, more intentional, and more likely to navigate the day from a centered place. Evening routines are equally powerful. They tell your body it's safe to release, to let go, to transition out of doing and into being. If you've been wired to work until collapse, this might feel unnatural at first, but even small rituals, closing your laptop, changing clothes, lighting a candle, journaling your thoughts, can create a boundary between the external and internal worlds. These rituals don't just signal rest, they protect it. And when practiced consistently, they train your system to shift into a state of restoration more easily, allowing you to replenish what the day asked of you. Restorative routines are personal. What calms one person may agitate another. The key is experimentation. Notice what gives you energy versus what drains it. Create rituals that make you feel held, not hustled. These are not about performance. They are about protection. They remind you that you are not just a producer, you are a person. And the more you honor that humanity in your routines, the more sustainable your growth becomes. Burnout isn't just physical exhaustion. It's emotional depletion, creative numbness, spiritual disconnection. It's the slow erosion of your spark, your presence, your sense of self. And it happens when you build a life that doesn't include space for your wholeness. Growth at its best is not a sprint to some distant destination. It's a deepening into yourself, a choosing again and again of what aligns, what nourishes, and what endures. You don't need to earn your rest. You don't need to apologize for choosing sustainability. You don't need to fear that slowing down will cost you your momentum. Because here's the truth. The most potent momentum is built through aligned action and integrated rest. When you reject the lie that burnout is the price of success, you begin to reclaim a version of growth that supports your entire being, not just the parts that produce. You are allowed to thrive without sacrificing yourself. You are allowed to build success at a pace that doesn't fracture your peace. You are allowed to choose a path of steady, soulful progress over one of frantic achievement. This is how you become burnout-proof. Not by being immune to life's demands, but by building systems, rituals, and rhythms that honor your capacity. And in doing so, you don't just grow, you evolve in a way that lasts, in a way that loves you back. Chapter 10. Own the upgrade. Why success feels uncomfortable. It's a strange contradiction. We long for success, plan for growth, and chase transformation with urgency and conviction. Yet, when it starts to arrive, something inside us balks. There's a discomfort, a tension, even a quiet panic that bubbles beneath the surface when things begin to improve. It's one of the least talked about but most common experiences of personal development, the anxiety that follows your own expansion. Why does success, something we claim to want so deeply, make us feel so out of place? The answer lives in the nervous system, in the subconscious mind, and in years of internal conditioning that taught us not to get too big, too loud, too visible, or too hopeful. Growth is not just a cognitive process, it's an identity shift, and identity shifts are rarely seamless. When you begin to level up, you're no longer playing by the rules that kept you small, and that can feel destabilizing, even threatening. This unease shows up in subtle but familiar ways. You finally land the opportunity, and instead of celebrating, you worry about whether you're ready or qualified. You start earning more, and guilt trickles in like water under a door. Quiet, persistent, hard to explain. You begin to heal and feel lighter, and suddenly you feel distant from people who once felt like home. These are not signs that you're failing. They are signs that you're shedding old skin. That shedding is uncomfortable, not because growth is wrong, but because your nervous system is wired to cling to the familiar, even if the familiar was holding you back. When you start experiencing success, your body and mind often lag behind your new reality. They haven't caught up yet, so they reach for the old patterns, self-doubt, sabotage, retreat. Not because they're true, but because they're known. Success stretches you. It invites you into new rooms, new relationships, and new roles. And even though these upgrades may align with your vision, they also expose you to visibility, vulnerability, and uncertainty. Suddenly, the safety of obscurity vanishes. You're seen, and with visibility comes the risk of criticism, the pressure to perform, and the fear of losing what you've gained. But here's the deeper truth. Growth is supposed to stretch you. Success isn't meant to feel entirely comfortable. If it did, it would mean you're not evolving. Discomfort is not a sign to retreat. It's a sign that your internal foundation is expanding to support the life you've been working toward. You're not out of alignment. You're out of your old shell. And the only way to adjust is to stay present, stay grounded, and keep moving forward from a place of deep, embodied truth, managing success, guilt, and upper limits. If you've been taught that struggle earns virtue, then success can feel like betrayal. This is what psychologists call the upper limit problem, an internal ceiling that caps how much happiness, ease, or success you'll allow yourself to experience before unconsciously sabotaging it. You might pick a fight on a good day, procrastinate after a win, or start second-guessing yourself the moment things flow easily. It's not that you don't want good things. It's that part of you believes you haven't suffered enough to deserve them. These upper limits are often invisible until you hit them, and then they show up as resistance, guilt, or self-imposed setbacks. The key to moving past them is not to try harder. It's to believe deeper. You have to expand your capacity to receive, to trust, and to let good things land without shrinking, to match the discomfort. Success guilt often stems from early programming, messages absorbed from family, culture, or faith that framed ambition as selfish or dangerous. Maybe you watched a parent self-sacrifice constantly and felt unspoken pressure to do the same. Maybe you were told to be grateful for what you have every time you dreamed bigger. Or maybe you internalized the belief that wanting more was greedy, even sinful. These narratives don't just disappear when you succeed. They follow you like shadows until you shine light on them. And shining light means asking, whose voice is this? Who taught me that struggle was the price of worth? What would it look like to let joy and success coexist without apology? Releasing success guilt is not about ignoring privilege or bypassing injustice. It's about refusing to equate self-denial with goodness. You can be grateful and ambitious. You can acknowledge where you've come from and still believe you deserve to rise. Owning your upgrade means becoming fluent in both humility and self-worth. It means knowing you're allowed to feel proud without being arrogant, allowed to take up space without diminishing others, and allowed to experience ease without earning it through pain. Success doesn't make you selfish. It makes you responsible for your energy, your impact, and the example you set. When you thrive without guilt, you give others permission to do the same. Staying grounded. During growth. As your life begins to expand, staying grounded becomes essential. Without grounding, growth can quickly become destabilizing, a kind of spiritual vertigo that leaves you overwhelmed, disconnected, or uncentered. Grounding is not about slowing down your evolution. It's about staying present to it. It's about cultivating a deep inner anchor so that as your external circumstances shift, your sense of self remains steady. Think of it like this. The taller the tree grows, the deeper its roots must go. The same is true for you. As you reach for more, you must return to yourself more often, reconnecting with your values, your vision, and your inner voice. Practically, this means creating rituals that tether you to who you are, not who the world expects you to become. Maybe it's journaling at the start of each week to check in with your intentions. Maybe it's a walk in nature that reminds you of the bigger picture. Maybe it's a mantra that brings you back to center when the noise gets too loud. Whatever it is, grounding requires consistency. It's not something you do only when things feel chaotic. It's something you build into your life so that when chaos comes, you're not knocked off course. It's about proactively cultivating practices that keep you connected to your body, your breath, and your truth. Grounding also means surrounding yourself with people who mirror your values, not just your success. As you level up, your circle might shift. Not everyone will understand your path. Some will project their fears. Others will pull you back toward the familiar. This is why discernment is key. Seek out relationships that nourish, not drain. Choose conversations that expand, not contract. And remember, staying grounded doesn't mean staying small. It means staying rooted in what matters so that your growth doesn't float untethered, but instead rises from a foundation of clarity, authenticity, and purpose. Celebrating without needing outside validation. We live in a culture obsessed with applause. Success is often measured not by how it feels, but by how many people acknowledge it. And while external validation isn't inherently wrong, it becomes a trap when it becomes your only source of affirmation. If you can only feel proud when someone else notices, your sense of success becomes fragile, held hostage by opinions, algorithms, or approval. True celebration, the kind that sustains your spirit, comes from within. It's quiet, intimate, and deeply personal. It doesn't require an audience. It simply asks you to witness yourself, to pause, to honor, and to let joy in without performance. Learning to celebrate yourself without outside validation is a radical act of sovereignty. It means reclaiming your power from the metrics of likes, comments, or praise. It means validating your effort even when the results aren't public or obvious. It means saying, "I did that," and letting it be enough. This internal celebration isn't about ego. It's about integration. When you acknowledge your wins from the inside out, you reinforce your progress in your nervous system, your mindset, and your self-concept. You start to see yourself not just as someone who hopes, but as someone who follows through, who creates, who grows. And that belief, once rooted, becomes unshakable. Celebration also fuels momentum. When you bypass it, you rob yourself of the emotional payoff that reinforces your habits. You're more likely to quit, not because the path is hard, but because you never stopped to feel how far you've come. So celebrate often. Celebrate loudly, quietly, privately, creatively. Light a candle. Dance in your kitchen. Write yourself a love letter. Share it if you want, but do it first for you. Make celebration part of your rhythm, not just a reward at the finish line. Because the truth is, there's no finish line. There's just a series of next steps, and the more you honor each one, the more your success becomes not a destination, but a way of being. To own your upgrade is to let yourself become who you were always becoming, without apology, without delay, and without shrinking to accommodate the discomfort of others. It means recognizing that the fear you feel isn't a warning, it's a threshold, and thresholds are meant to be crossed. You don't have to wait until you feel ready to rise. Readiness is often a byproduct of action, not a prerequisite. The moment you step into the new, you begin to embody it. You learn by living, you grow by showing up, and you own your upgrade not by knowing every step, but by refusing to step back. Let this chapter be your invitation to receive your growth fully, to stop minimizing your wins, to stop fearing your expansion, and to stop waiting for permission. You're not here to stay the same. You're here to evolve, and your evolution is not a threat to others. It's a gift to the world. When you grow in integrity, when you rise without abandoning yourself, when you lead with both power and tenderness, you become a lighthouse, not perfect, not above struggle, but steady, visible, and rooted. And that kind of presence changes everything. For you, for those around you, and for the future you're building, one bold, grounded step at a time. Chapter 11, The Power of Resilience, Understanding. Resilience is often misconstrued as mere toughness or the ability to endure hardship without flinching. However, true resilience is a dynamic process, a complex interplay between our internal capacities and external circumstances. It is not about being impervious to pain or adversity, but about how we respond, adapt, and grow in the face of challenges. Resilience involves a set of behaviors, thoughts, and actions that can be learned and developed by anyone. It is the mental reservoir of strength that people are able to call on in times of need to carry them through without falling apart. This capacity for resilience is not fixed. It can be cultivated and strengthened over time through intentional practice and reflection. The foundation of resilience lies in our ability to maintain a realistic perspective while remaining optimistic. This balance allows us to acknowledge the difficulties we face without becoming overwhelmed by them. It involves recognizing our emotions, understanding their sources, and managing them effectively. Emotional regulation is a key component of resilience, enabling us to navigate stress and recover from setbacks. Moreover, resilient individuals often possess a strong sense of purpose and meaning in life, which provides them with the motivation to persevere through hardships. This sense of purpose acts as a guiding star, helping them to stay focused and committed even when the path ahead is uncertain. Social support also plays a crucial role in fostering resilience. Having a network of supportive relationships provides a buffer against stress and offers practical assistance during difficult times. These connections offer emotional comfort, encouragement, and a sense of belonging, all of which are essential for resilience. Furthermore, resilient individuals tend to be proactive in seeking help and are not afraid to rely on others when necessary. They understand that resilience does not mean going it alone, but involves interdependence and mutual support. By cultivating strong relationships and engaging with their communities, they build a safety net that helps them to bounce back from adversity more effectively. Building resilience through adversity. Adversity, while challenging, serves as a crucible for developing resilience. It is through facing and overcoming difficulties that we learn about our strengths, limitations, and capacities for growth. Each challenge presents an opportunity to develop new skills, gain insights, and build confidence in our ability to handle future obstacles. This process of growth through adversity is known as post-traumatic growth, where individuals emerge from difficult experiences with a greater appreciation for life, improved relationships, and a renewed sense of personal strength. One of the key factors in building resilience through adversity is the ability to reframe negative experiences. This involves viewing challenges not as insurmountable problems, but as opportunities for learning and development. By shifting our perspective, we can find meaning in our struggles and use them as stepping stones toward personal growth. This cognitive reframing helps to reduce feelings of helplessness and fosters a sense of control over our circumstances. It encourages us to focus on what we can change and to take proactive steps toward improvement. Another important aspect of building resilience is developing problem-solving skills. Resilient individuals are adept at identifying potential solutions to the challenges they face and are willing to take action to implement them. They approach problems with a sense of curiosity and a willingness to experiment with different strategies. This proactive approach not only helps to resolve immediate issues, but also builds confidence in their ability to handle future difficulties. Additionally, resilient individuals are flexible and adaptable, able to adjust their plans and expectations in response to changing circumstances. This adaptability allows them to navigate uncertainty and maintain their equilibrium in the face of disruption. The role of self-care in resilience. Self-care is a fundamental component of resilience, providing the physical, emotional, and mental resources needed to cope with stress and recover from adversity. It involves intentional actions to maintain and improve one's well-being, including proper nutrition, regular exercise, adequate sleep, and relaxation techniques. These practices help to regulate the body's stress response and promote overall health, making it easier to handle challenges when they arise. In addition to physical self-care, emotional self-care is essential for resilience. This includes activities that help to manage emotions, such as mindfulness, journaling, and engaging in hobbies that bring joy and fulfillment. Emotional self-care also involves setting healthy boundaries, recognizing one's limits, and saying no when necessary to prevent burnout. By prioritizing their emotional well-being, resilient individuals are better equipped to handle stress and maintain a positive outlook. Mental self-care, which encompasses activities that stimulate and challenge the mind, is also important for resilience. This can include reading, learning new skills, and engaging in creative pursuits. These activities not only provide a sense of accomplishment and purpose, but also help to build cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to adapt one's thinking in response to new information or changing circumstances. Cognitive flexibility is a key aspect of resilience, enabling individuals to navigate complex situations and find innovative solutions to problems. Resilience in the face of change. Change, whether anticipated or unexpected, can be a significant source of stress and uncertainty. Resilience enables individuals to navigate change more effectively by fostering adaptability and a proactive mindset. Rather than resisting change, resilient individuals embrace it as an opportunity for growth and development. They are open to new experiences and willing to step outside of their comfort zones to explore new possibilities. One of the ways that resilient individuals manage change is by maintaining a sense of continuity and stability in their lives. This can involve preserving routines, traditions, and relationships that provide a sense of familiarity and grounding. These anchors help to reduce feelings of chaos and provide a foundation from which to explore new directions. Additionally, resilient individuals are skilled at setting realistic goals and creating action plans to achieve them. This goal-oriented approach provides a sense of direction and purpose, helping to mitigate the uncertainty that often accompanies change. Resilient individuals also practice acceptance, recognizing that change is an inevitable part of life. They understand that while they may not be able to control all aspects of a situation, they can control their responses and attitudes. This acceptance allows them to let go of resistance and focus their energy on adapting to new circumstances. By cultivating a mindset of acceptance and adaptability, they are able to navigate change with greater ease and confidence. Cultivating a resilient mindset. Developing a resilient mindset involves cultivating certain attitudes and beliefs that support resilience. One of these is a growth mindset, which is the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through effort and learning. Individuals with a growth mindset view challenges as opportunities to grow and are more likely to persevere in the face of setbacks. This mindset fosters resilience by encouraging a proactive approach to learning and development. Another important attitude is optimism, which involves maintaining a hopeful and positive outlook on life. Optimistic individuals are more likely to expect positive outcomes and to view setbacks as temporary and manageable. This positive outlook helps to buffer against stress and promotes persistence in the face of adversity. However, it is important to note that optimism should be realistic, grounded in an accurate assessment of the situation and balanced with a willingness to confront difficult truths. Self-efficacy, or the belief in one's ability to influence events and outcomes, is also crucial for resilience. Individuals. Chapter 12. Joy as Rebellion. Why joy matters, especially when the world feels heavy. It's easy to dismiss joy as optional, a luxury, something to be earned after all the boxes are checked, the responsibilities fulfilled, the pain processed. But this mindset betrays something deeper, a belief that joy is frivolous, even selfish, especially in a world weighed down by injustice, uncertainty, and collective fatigue. We live in times where burnout is romanticized, where exhaustion is the default setting, and where emotional numbness is often seen as a badge of honor. In this landscape, joy becomes more than just a fleeting emotion. It becomes an act of quiet defiance, a reclaiming of your aliveness. Choosing joy, especially when the world feels broken, is not a form of denial, but a radical affirmation of your humanity. It's a refusal to let darkness be the final word. It says, I am still here. I still get to feel. I still get to live. To reach for joy amid heaviness is not to ignore the weight of the world. It's to refuse to be entirely consumed by it. It's easy to become overwhelmed by the 24/7 churn of crisis, to internalize the message that you must always be vigilant, always sacrificing, always performing your awareness. But what if part of your contribution to a better world is to live well within it? What if your healing, your delight, your pleasure are a protest against systems that profit from your disconnection and disempowerment? Systems that want you too tired to imagine, too afraid to try, too burdened to dream? Reclaiming joy is a rebellion against emotional erosion. It's saying, I choose to remember what it feels like to be alive, to laugh uncontrollably, to feel sunlight on my skin without guilt, to savor what is beautiful, to give myself back the parts of me that never needed fixing, just permission. When everything feels urgent, joy invites you to slow down. When everything feels heavy, it gives you breath. When everything feels uncertain, it offers presence. And when you feel powerless, joy gives you a thread of agency again. In a world built to distract and deplete, the decision to experience authentic joy is revolutionary. It reminds you of your sovereignty, of your ability to define your own relationship to time, to worth, to hope. So this isn't about toxic positivity. It's not about pretending things are okay when they're not. It's about learning how to hold joy in one hand and sorrow in the other, and still choosing to dance, still choosing to sing, still choosing to say, there is more for me than survival. Reconnecting with your creative spark. Somewhere along the way, many of us forgot how to play. Our inner creative spark, once alive and wild, got buried under deadlines, judgments, and the relentless need to prove ourselves. We were told to grow up, be realistic, be productive. And in doing so, we often let go of the very things that brought us alive: the daydreaming, the drawing, the building of imaginary worlds, the spontaneous dancing in the kitchen. Creativity became something reserved for artists, something graded, judged, monetized. But in truth, creativity is your birthright. It's not about perfection or output. It's about expression. It's about freedom. And most of all, it's about remembering that you are more than what you produce. Reconnecting with your creative spark isn't about becoming someone new. It's about recovering the parts of you that got quiet. Creativity doesn't need to be performative to be powerful. You don't have to write a book or paint a masterpiece to be creative. You can cook a meal with intention, rearrange your furniture for fun, hum a tune while you wash the dishes. Creativity lives in how you move through your day, how you problem solve, how you make space for beauty, even when no one is watching. When you allow creativity to be part of your life again, not as a means to an end, but as a practice of presence, you're giving yourself permission to feel again, to imagine again, to breathe. Reclaiming creativity also means making peace with imperfection, letting go of the idea that everything has to be good or useful, that it has to be worthy of someone else's attention. True joy in creativity is messy, playful, and deeply personal. It's finger painting with your kids and getting flour everywhere while baking. It's sketching poorly and loving it anyway. It's singing in the car off-key because it feels good in your chest. This kind of joy doesn't ask for permission. It just is. And when you let yourself indulge in this kind of creative play, you are affirming that joy doesn't need a reason. It just needs space. Guilt-free rest and fun. Somewhere deep in our collective psyche, a belief took root. Rest must be earned. Fun is frivolous. Play is irresponsible. And so, we chase productivity like a finish line, waiting for the moment we've done enough to deserve a break. But the truth is, that moment rarely arrives. There's always more to do, another fire to put out, another mountain to climb. And so we collapse into rest only when we've reached the brink of burnout, not as an act of self-respect, but as a last resort. Joy becomes transactional. Rest becomes a reward instead of a rhythm. But what if you didn't have to justify your joy? What if rest and play were essential, not optional? Guilt-free rest is not laziness, it's strategy. It's sustainability. It's the quiet knowing that you cannot pour from an empty cup and that your worth was never tied to how much you hustle. You're not a machine. You are a living, breathing human with needs beyond output. And fun, real, silly, unproductive fun, is not childish. It's medicine. It's how you remember who you are beneath the layers of obligation. Joy and rest reconnect you to your body, your intuition, your pleasure. They soften the edges of stress and remind you that life is not only about goals, it's also about moments. To rest and play without guilt, you must first confront the beliefs that tell you you're only valuable when you're useful. You must unlearn the idea that taking care of yourself is selfish, and you must build new internal narratives that celebrate balance, pleasure, and restoration. That voice in your head that says you should be doing more, it's not the voice of truth. It's the echo of a system that was never designed for your thriving. Dismantle it, challenge it, replace it with one that says, my joy is necessary. My rest is sacred. My fun is not a waste of time. It's part of what keeps me whole. Creating rituals of joy. Rituals are powerful because they create rhythm in a world of chaos. They anchor you, steady you, and bring intention to your daily life. And when those rituals are infused with joy, they become portals to presence, healing, and delight. Creating rituals of joy means intentionally building moments into your life that spark pleasure, beauty, or meaning, not as a reward, but as a practice. It's less about the grandeur of the act and more about its consistency. It's lighting a candle while you journal in the morning. It's putting on music and dancing while you fold laundry. It's walking at sunset every Friday to mark the end of your work week. Joy rituals don't need to be complex. They just need to be yours. The beauty of rituals is that they make joy accessible, even when life feels hard. You don't have to wait for a vacation or a milestone to feel good. You can build micro moments of joy into your day like breadcrumbs, leading you home to yourself. These rituals become your rebellion against burnout. They say, I will not wait for joy. I will create it. They reclaim time, space, and intention from the noise of life and redirect it toward what makes your spirit come alive. And over time, these small practices accumulate. They shift your baseline. They teach your nervous system that safety, pleasure, and softness are not things you have to chase. They are things you can create. Your rituals of joy can be seasonal, sacred, or spontaneous. They can be shared or solo. The point is not perfection, it's presence. It's choosing to infuse your life with things that feel good, just because. Maybe it's brewing tea at the same time each day, or maybe it's keeping a gratitude jar you drop notes into. Maybe it's a Sunday night bath or a morning playlist. Whatever it is, let it be a reminder. Your joy matters. Your light matters. And you are allowed to feel good without apologizing for it. Chapter 12. Joy as Rebellion. Why joy matters, especially when the world feels heavy. It's easy to overlook joy when the weight of the world presses relentlessly on your shoulders. The news cycle hums like a distant storm, full of fear and fire. Bills need paying. Expectations pile up. Someone you love is hurting. And even when your own life is relatively stable, the sheer volume of collective suffering can make it feel selfish to smile too long, to laugh too hard, or to breathe too deeply without guilt. But in moments like these, especially in moments like these, joy becomes more than just a pleasant emotion. It becomes a form of defiance, a rebellion, a way to say, I am still here. I still choose to feel alive. When everything around us encourages anxiety, numbness, or despair, choosing joy is not denial, it is resistance. It's the soul's quiet but powerful refusal to be swallowed by the dark. It is the ultimate reclaiming of your humanity in an increasingly inhumane world. Joy is not frivolous. It is foundational. We tend to think of it as optional, something to pursue only once everything else is in order. After the chores are done, after the inbox is cleared, after the world is fixed. But joy is not the dessert. It's part of the main course. Without it, everything else starts to rot from the inside. It is the glue that holds resilience together, the oxygen that allows creativity, connection, and courage to flourish. People who have known grief often understand this most intimately, that joy and sorrow are not opposites, but companions. Joy doesn't erase pain. It reminds you that you're still capable of feeling something beautiful despite it. That reminder alone can shift your entire emotional landscape, even if just for a moment. And sometimes a moment is all you need to keep going. Reconnecting with your creative spark. There's a part of you that was born for joy, a part that didn't care about being efficient or productive or impressive. This version of you existed long before you learned to measure your worth through output or performance. You can often find this part of you buried beneath the noise of adulthood, disguised in your childhood memories. Maybe it's the version of you who built pillow forts, wrote stories in spiral-bound notebooks, or danced wildly to music no one else could hear. That part of you still exists, but it's been starved. Reconnecting with your creative spark means feeding that inner self not because it leads to anything useful, but because it's part of who you are. Creativity, when practiced without agenda, becomes a doorway back to joy. Too often, we confuse creativity with productivity. We think that in order for an activity to be valid, it must lead to something tangible, a book, a business, a side hustle. But when joy is the goal, the process matters more than the product. Finger painting at your kitchen table, singing off-key in the car, scribbling in a journal with no structure or purpose. These are acts of joyful rebellion. They remind you that you are more than your to-do list, They reconnect you with the parts of yourself that were never meant to be optimized. When you let go of performance and return to pure play, you uncover a deep well of aliveness. That aliveness is your creative spark, and once lit, it becomes a lantern in dark times, helping you find your way back to yourself again and again. Guilt-free rest and fun. In a culture that equates rest with laziness and fun with irresponsibility, allowing yourself guilt-free joy can feel almost criminal. You might catch yourself relaxing on the couch and suddenly think, I should be doing something. That voice is not your intuition. It's internalized capitalism. It's the echo of a system that taught you your value is conditional, based on how much you can produce, achieve, or contribute. Guilt-free rest is a direct rejection of that lie. It's a way of saying, I do not have to earn my right to exist peacefully. My worth is not tied to how busy I am. Fun is not something I reward myself with at the end of exhaustion. It's something I deserve by default. Rest and fun are not escapes from growth. They are vital to it. You cannot expand your life if you're constantly running on empty. Just as muscles need recovery time to grow stronger, your mind and spirit need space to breathe, to wander, to play. The most creative, resilient, and emotionally intelligent people are not those who grind the hardest, but those who know how to replenish themselves. Guilt-free joy isn't about excess or indulgence. It's about balance. It's about listening to what your body and soul are asking for and responding with compassion rather than criticism. And sometimes, what they're asking for is absurd. A spontaneous road trip, a nap in the middle of the day, an hour spent watching ridiculous videos that make you laugh so hard you snort. These things may not add to your resume, but they add to your life, and that matters more than we've been led to believe. Creating rituals of joy. If joy is a rebellion, then rituals are how we sustain the revolution. Joy doesn't have to be random or rare. You can build it into your life on purpose, just like brushing your teeth or eating breakfast. The key is to create rituals that are uniquely yours. Tiny acts of nourishment that anchor you in your body, ground you in the present, and give your nervous system a break from constant vigilance. These rituals don't have to be elaborate. In fact, the simpler they are, the more likely they'll stick. A cup of tea sipped slowly before the day begins. A playlist of songs that make you feel unstoppable. A weekly walk without a destination. A practice of writing down 3 things that made you smile. These aren't luxuries. They are survival tools. They are declarations that even in the midst of chaos, you still claim a slice of peace. The beauty of rituals is that they don't require external permission. You don't need a special occasion, the right mood, or anyone else's approval. You simply decide that your joy is worth scheduling, worth protecting, worth prioritizing. Over time, these rituals become more than habits. They become sacred spaces. Places you can return to when the world feels too loud or your inner critic grows too harsh. Rituals give structure to your softness. They remind you that joy is not something you stumble into by accident. It's something you can cultivate with care. And the more you do, the more resilient you become, because you're not waiting for the world to be okay in order to feel good. You're creating your own pockets of okayness, one joyful ritual at a time. Joy is an act of reclamation. To choose joy, deliberately, consistently, especially when things are hard, is to reclaim your power. It is to declare that your inner world is not entirely dictated by your outer circumstances. That even if the world around you is burning, you can still hold on to wonder, still laugh, still hope. Joy reminds you that you are not just a passive consumer of life's events, but an active participant in your own emotional experience. This doesn't mean you avoid sadness, fear, or rage. Quite the opposite. It means you allow space for all of it, Because your capacity for joy is directly linked to your capacity for depth. And depth requires emotional range, so you make room for beauty in the middle of the mess. You learn to hold contradiction. You become someone who can cry and dance in the same hour, someone who can feel despair and still reach for delight. That is not a weakness. It's an incredible kind of strength. Joy is also a compass. It points you toward what makes you feel most alive. When you follow it, even in small ways, you start to rebuild your life around what nourishes rather than depletes you. That shift, though often invisible to others, can be monumental. You may begin to make different choices, to leave relationships that drain you, to seek work that lights you up, to create boundaries that protect your energy. These choices often begin with a single question. What would bring me joy right now? That question, asked consistently and without apology, can transform your life, not because it leads to a constant state of happiness, but because it leads to truth. And when you are living in alignment with your truth, joy finds you more easily. It starts to feel less like a rebellion and more like a return to yourself. Chapter 13. Your people, your power. The importance of aligned relationships. When we talk about transformation, we often focus on internal landscapes, the shifts in our mindset, the healing of old wounds, the commitment to new habits. But one of the most overlooked and yet most potent levers of change lies outside ourselves, in our relationships. The people around us are not just companions or co-passengers on life's journey. They are mirrors, magnifiers, and sometimes massive obstacles. Your environment, especially the emotional and social one, profoundly shapes who you become. It can either uplift your evolution or quietly sabotage it. Aligned relationships don't mean perfect harmony or people who never challenge you. In fact, the best relationships will challenge you to grow, but from a place of love, respect, and shared values. Aligned relationships feel expansive, not restrictive. They make room for your complexity rather than forcing you into a mold. When you're around aligned people, you don't shrink to be accepted or silence your truth to maintain peace. You speak and they listen. You dream and they believe. You falter and they remind you of your strength. To thrive, to truly live unstuck, you must curate your connections with the same intentionality you bring to your goals. Boundaries versus barriers. Boundaries are a tool of self-respect. They are not walls. They are doors with locks, intentionally placed, thoughtfully opened. And yet, so many of us have been conditioned to believe that setting boundaries is rude, selfish, or unkind. We avoid them out of guilt or fear of conflict, only to find ourselves feeling resentful, burned out, or invisible. The distinction between a boundary and a barrier is subtle but profound. A boundary communicates, "This is where I end and you begin." A barrier, on the other hand, says, "Stay out. I'm not safe." Boundaries invite connection with clarity. Barriers avoid connection entirely. To thrive, you'll need both, but in the right measure. For example, a boundary might sound like, "I'm not available for calls after 8 p.m. because I'm prioritizing rest." A barrier might be cutting someone off completely without communication, not because it's unsafe, but because you fear discomfort. Barriers may be necessary in abusive or deeply toxic dynamics, but many times we use them as avoidance tools when we haven't developed the skills to navigate healthy conflict. Cultivating relational health requires learning how to assert without aggression, to listen without absorbing, and to be present without abandoning yourself. When you master boundaries, you stop leaking energy. You start feeling safe in your own skin, regardless of how others respond. Curating your growth circle. We often become like the 5 people we spend the most time with, not because we mimic their every behavior, but because energy, beliefs, and norms are contagious. If you're surrounded by people who normalize burnout, disconnection, and small thinking, It's almost impossible not to internalize that reality. But when your circle is composed of growth-minded, emotionally available, and values-aligned people, your potential multiplies. A growth circle doesn't mean a bunch of people who are just like you. In fact, some of the most powerful additions to your circle will be people who challenge you, who bring diverse perspectives, and who lovingly call you out when you start shrinking. But what they share is an emotional baseline of self-responsibility, curiosity, and care. They don't try to fix you. They hold space for you. They don't diminish your dreams. They ask how they can support them. These people might be lifelong friends, mentors, creative collaborators, or even people you meet online in a season of shared learning. The key is being intentional. Evaluate your circle not by history, but by harmony. Who in your life makes you feel alive, brave, and rooted? Who, when you leave their presence, do you feel more like yourself? Your growth circle should energize you, not exhaust you. And yes, that might mean some relationships naturally fall away. Let them. Don't hold on to connections just because they're familiar. Familiar doesn't always mean healthy. It just means practiced. Giving and receiving support. There's a myth that strength means doing it all on your own. That vulnerability is weakness. That needing support is a flaw. But the truth is, receiving support is a radical act of self-trust. It means you believe you're worthy of care. It means you recognize that we're wired for connection, not independence. At the same time, giving support isn't about overextending yourself or playing savior. It's about showing up with presence and empathy, without trying to control the outcome. True support is mutual, respectful, and empowering. It's not transactional. It's relational. And here's the nuance. Not everyone will be able to meet you in that space. Some people only offer support when it makes them feel needed. Others expect you to be available for their needs, but disappear when you have your own. Part of building your growth circle means learning to discern who can hold space for you without judgment or ego. It also means practicing the often uncomfortable skill of asking for what you need. Can you just listen, not try to fix? Would you be open to checking in with me weekly while I work through this change? These aren't signs of weakness. They're acts of emotional maturity. And just as crucial is learning how to hold space for others in ways that are nourishing, not depleting. Support doesn't mean solving. It means showing up, witnessing, encouraging. When we build these kinds of reciprocal, emotionally intelligent relationships, we expand what's possible, not just for ourselves, but for everyone in our orbit. The quiet power of letting go. Sometimes the most courageous relational act is not to stay, but to leave, to lovingly detach from connections that no longer serve who you're becoming. This is one of the hardest and most emotionally complex parts of growth. We're not just walking away from a person. We're walking away from the role we played in that dynamic. Maybe you were the fixer, the emotional sponge, the reliable one who always said yes. Letting go means grieving not just the relationship, but also the identity you constructed inside it. But clinging to relationships out of obligation or fear of loneliness comes at a steep cost. You start shrinking to fit. You start questioning your worth. You start resenting them and yourself. The truth is, not everyone is meant to walk with you forever. Some people are seasonal. They came to teach you, to mirror you, to catalyze your awakening. And that's okay. You can honor what was without forcing what no longer fits. Letting go can be done with grace. It doesn't require drama, villainizing, or ghosting. Sometimes it's a quiet reallocation of energy. Sometimes it's a brave conversation. Sometimes it's a gentle unfollow or a firm boundary. But whatever form it takes, trust that letting go creates space for deeper connections, truer belonging, and more aligned love. You don't need to cling to outdated bonds to prove you're loyal. Be loyal to your future, your integrity, your aliveness. Healing through relationship. While much of healing happens in solitude, in journaling, reflection therapy, there's a level of transformation that can only happen in relationship. Why? Because many of our deepest wounds were formed in relationship. We learned to distrust ourselves because someone else dismissed our feelings. We learned to overextend because love felt conditional. We learned to abandon our needs because our survival depended on keeping the peace. And so, the most potent healing often happens when we're seen, heard, and honored in the places we were once dismissed. When someone says, "That makes sense," instead of, "You're too sensitive." When they ask, "What do you need?" instead of, "Why are you being difficult?" These moments rewire us. They reteach us what safety feels like. But to receive this kind of healing, we must show up vulnerably, authentically, and consistently. We must allow others to see the parts of us we've hidden, not to be fixed, but to be known. And we must extend that same grace to others. Relationships are not perfect. They're messy, dynamic, and sometimes frustrating. But when both people are committed to honesty, curiosity, and growth, even conflict becomes a portal to deeper understanding. Don't isolate yourself in the name of healing. Let people in. Let them witness your becoming. Let them reflect the beauty you've forgotten you carry. Community as a catalyst. You are not meant to thrive alone. You were not designed to carry the full weight of your healing, your ambition, your becoming without support. Our culture may glorify self-made success, but the truth is, every transformation is a collaboration, seen or unseen. It's the teacher who spoke life into you, the friend who believed in you when you didn't, the stranger whose words cracked open a new perspective. You are not self-made. You are soul-made, formed and reformed through the alchemy of connection. So, take inventory of your inner circle. Love who loves you. Release who diminishes you. Protect your peace. Choose aligned relationships, not out of fear, but from a deep knowing that your energy is sacred and your becoming is precious. When your people are your power, you don't just grow, you rise. Chapter 14. Keep going without burning out again. Resilience as a lifestyle. Resilience isn't a momentary burst of strength. It's a lifestyle, a rhythm you learn to live by when life doesn't go according to the script you thought you were following. It's not the ability to power through or push harder. Those are the tools of burnout, not endurance. True resilience is soft on the outside, but forged like steel at its core. It doesn't always look impressive or Instagram-worthy. Sometimes it looks like resting before you're exhausted, like saying no even though you could technically say yes, like walking away from something that drains you, even though everyone says you should be grateful for it. Resilience is your capacity to bend without breaking, to recalibrate without shame, and to recommit without self-abandonment. It's the steady heartbeat beneath your growth, the commitment to return to yourself again and again, no matter how many times the world tries to pull you away. The people we admire for their strength are rarely those who never struggled. They are the ones who learned how to suffer smartly, how to recover deliberately, and how to sustain themselves through the seasons. When you stop seeing life as a constant climb and start seeing it as a cycle of expansion and contraction, effort and ease, you begin to understand that thriving isn't about intensity. It's about integration. The resilient person doesn't rely on crisis to trigger action. They don't need chaos to give them permission to rest or grow. They move with awareness. They plan for the long game. They build scaffolding around their lives, not to hold themselves up when they collapse, but to support steady, intentional momentum. This is what we must aim for. Not just bouncing back, but bouncing forward, wiser and more aligned every time. recognizing when you need to pause. One of the most powerful decisions you can make in a growth season is to pause. Not because you're weak, not because you failed, but because you're awake enough to recognize that your internal engine needs recalibration. The old you might have waited until you broke down, until the fatigue turned into resentment, the ambition curdled into anxiety, the hustle masked a hollow ache you couldn't name. But not this time. This time, you can notice the signs. The way your creativity dries up. The way small tasks start to feel like Everest. The way joy becomes inaccessible even when you're technically winning. These are not inconveniences. They're invitations. Invitations to recalibrate, to step back, to breathe and remember why you started. Pausing doesn't mean stopping forever. It means giving yourself space to re-enter with more clarity and less baggage. Think of it like a musician resting between notes. That silence isn't wasted. It creates rhythm. It shapes the experience. In your life, those intentional pauses, whether it's a full day offline, a week away, or a single slow morning, become sacred. They're where your nervous system resets, where your intuition speaks louder, where your inner compass realigns. But if you've spent years tying your worth to your output, pausing can feel like free-falling. You might feel guilt, fear, even panic. That's normal. Let those emotions surface without letting them drive your next move. You are not behind. You are right on time. And in that pause, you are strengthening something even more important than momentum, your trust in yourself. Course correcting without collapsing. Too often, we wait until the crash to course correct. We ignore the small signals, irritation, avoidance, fatigue, because we don't believe we have permission to adjust unless we've completely unraveled. This chapter invites you to dismantle that belief. You don't need a breakdown to justify a breakthrough. You don't need to destroy what you've built just because it's misaligned. You can make micro adjustments. You can pivot gently. You can shift without shame. This is the essence of sustainable growth. The courage to course correct while still standing. Start by noticing where friction lives in your life. Not all friction is bad. Some of it pushes us toward growth. But some is chronic, unnecessary, and self-inflicted. Maybe it's that calendar you resent, the commitment you made that no longer fits, the version of yourself you're clinging to, even though she's outgrown her role. When you learn to spot these misalignments early, you give yourself options. Instead of collapsing from the weight of accumulated dissonance, you recalibrate before the system overloads. Ask yourself, what can be simplified? What can be released? What needs redefined, not abandoned? And if you do find yourself on the edge, don't wait for collapse to validate your need for change. Let self-respect be enough. Let your aliveness matter more than your image. You are allowed to want more ease, even if everything looks fine on the outside. You don't have to burn it all down to create a life that fits. You can prune with care. You can rebuild with tenderness. You can course correct as a form of devotion, not just to your goals, but to your soul. Becoming your own safe place. Perhaps the most radical act of resilience is becoming a safe place for yourself. Not just a place of high standards or relentless drive, but a space of compassion, patience, and fierce loyalty. For most of us, our internal world is not safe. It's a battlefield, a courtroom, a constant barrage of judgment, comparison, and pressure. But imagine what would shift if your inner voice became your refuge, not your tormentor. If your inner world was a place you could return to when life felt overwhelming, not to be scolded or fixed, but to be held. This is where self-trust is born, in the quiet, consistent practice of showing up for yourself without conditions. It means you don't abandon yourself when you're messy, lost, or unsure. You don't weaponize high standards to shame your slow days. You don't force progress at the expense of your peace. Instead, you listen, you soothe, You speak to yourself like someone you're responsible for protecting. This isn't about lowering the bar. It's about changing the tone. And from that place of safety, your growth becomes inevitable. Because when you feel safe inside, you take bigger, braver steps outside. Creating internal safety doesn't mean you never feel fear. It means fear doesn't govern your identity. You stop seeing discomfort as danger and start seeing it as data. You stop performing for approval and start aligning with authenticity. You stop outsourcing your worth and start rooting it in presence. This is the work of becoming unstuck for life, not just breaking free from the past, but building a future where you are your own anchor. Where no matter what happens out there, you know how to come home to yourself in here. Closing reflections. Thriving forward. This chapter and this book are not about arriving. They're about awakening, about returning to yourself again and again with more love, more clarity, and more courage. You've done hard things before. You've carried heavy loads. But now you have something even more powerful: the tools, the insight, and the permission to carry them differently, to walk through your life with more intention, to build, not just survive, to thrive, not as a performance, but as a practice. Thriving forward means committing to a different kind of rhythm, one where rest isn't a reward, it's a right, where boundaries aren't barriers, they're bridges to your best self, where joy isn't a luxury, it's your fuel. It means treating your time, energy, and attention as sacred currency. It means becoming the kind of person who doesn't just chase goals but embodies values, who doesn't just react but responds with grounded presence, who doesn't just live but lives awake. So as you move beyond this book, remember, getting unstuck isn't a one-time decision. It's a lifestyle, a series of daily choices to listen deeply, live boldly, and return kindly. There will be setbacks, there will be doubt, but now you know how to recognize it, how to move through it, how to begin again without losing yourself. And that, dear reader, is what it truly means to keep going without burning out again.